we're going to call to order the special meeting of the Board of Selectmen for January 29th, and it is 4:08 p.m. And we will sing the Pledge of Allegiance. Oh, it's over behind the whiteboard. Thanks, Kevin. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Just going to have a couple comments.
Go ahead.
If that's okay. Heather and I went through this two years ago in 2022. And, I had talked to Lee before he left about, improving the process, maybe getting a facilitator, and Franklin did a lot of research on it. And then as time disappeared and Lee left, Heather and I talked a little bit about what we wanted to cover here. And then basically time right now, we turned it over to the town manager's team. Mark offered to facilitate, and given that he's also new, we're new, we thought it'd be a good way for us to all do this together and figure out where we want to go and have the town manager who's going to be there to implement the goals, and also we can create his goals off of our goals. So I thought that would be a good way to handle that. Also, we had left some observations. First, we wanted, I'll let it go, but our own observations, but Lee also included some observations he had heard from some of the board members that he had seen, and those may lead to policy goal items for us also. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to our facilitator, Mr. Mark Nelson.
Thank you very much, Wendy. Good evening, everybody. So just a little bit on the process and how we're going to move things forward. So we have essentially three sections of tonight's agenda. The first one is, what we wanted to do was have a free-ranging discussion with all of you, get your thoughts and an overview, a 100,000-foot view of what you see as your own personal objectives, why you ran for the elected office, what you think you can bring to this collaborative group in terms of moving things forward for the town. There's a tremendous amount of community history in this room. I'm the newcomer. You'll find that throughout our working together, I'll be hopefully a good listener. We've got with us Franklin and Tom, who you both know, and they've been working with us for the last week or two, and with some of you to get some general talking points and things that we can help lead the discussion. Right? So part one, what we're going to do before we get into what we have seen the prior board do, we're kind of starting with a clean slate. And this is just sort of free association. We're going to capture some of the thoughts as we go around and talk to each of you about what you think is important and what you'd like particularly to see this board work on for the next 2 years, right? Right at the top, and I think I may have mentioned this to some of you, that in my experience, and I've probably worked with close to 50 elected board or council members in my career, spanning 3 or 4 different communities, and I think that one thing that they all say when they leave office, and I said it myself when I left office, was time flies. And that some of the things that you hoped to accomplish when you first took that oath of office just were either elusive or they were too big a lift, you couldn't get to them. Many times we decide, well, we're going to stay and run for another term because there's still work to do. So what you'll hear from me as we work through this process is we think the best thing to do is to try to put our goals and objectives into 2 large categories. One is a longer term for the town. These are things that could involve infrastructure, buildings, projects that obviously require a lot of funding and planning. In many cases are 2, 3, 4, even 5 years out. If you're looking particularly at building new buildings or moving departments or any of those heavy lifts, those are things that we can put on the longer term. And the more immediate term, which is something I think we're interested in getting out of the gate quickly with, are things that from a policy perspective this board could accomplish working collaboratively with the town manager's office, other external stakeholders in setting the course ahead. We'll talk at various points about the POCD. We're going to be talking about economic development. probably going to be touching on some of the key things that are of interest to all of you, particularly housing. All of the things that I think prior boards have started to wrestle with. And I challenge you as we have this discussion to look at what is achievable, number one. What is something that you think you can build consensus among yourselves, and particularly with the outside stakeholders and the community, members of the community. I think that we've got some really extraordinary opportunity today. We've got 4 new members, we've got a new town manager, and we've got a tremendously robust staff at Town Hall, which, I've only been here 3 weeks, so I heard me say, how proud I am of the work that the staff at Town Hall has been doing. I've met with literally everybody, and those I haven't met with personally are on the list for this week and next week, but my takeaway so far is that is a resource. Town staff, employees, and other stakeholders that I've met are a resource to all of us as we try to get through the agenda and through your goals and objectives. So after that general discussion, which we'll get into in a moment, we're going to spend some time on section 2, which is looking at what the goals and objectives were of your predecessors. And you've seen your packets, you've got some information about what those goals were. It wasn't clear to me as I reviewed all the material exactly what the prioritization was. And I think one of my goals for this working group is to try to focus on timelines and achievable metrics. How do you measure success? What are the performance metrics by which we'll all hold ourselves accountable for hopefully achieving some of the objectives that we want. So for that reason, we're looking at the goals and objectives of the prior board in section 2 after we've got sort of a rough outline of what your perspective of things are. And then section 3, we're going to take a look at the former interim town manager Lee Erdman's work. He authored, along with staff, a pretty comprehensive report of suggestions, recommendations, talking points, ideas that were partly for me as the incoming town manager, and I think partly for consideration in many respects of our policy boards, including the Board of Selectmen. What we did with Lee's work is we tried to synthesize it to the 10 or 12 things that we thought were probably the most important for this board to focus on, but we've also included, and you've been provided by email, the full report, which is quite a bit more lengthy, and we would encourage you, if you haven't already, to take a deeper dive into that, and feel free to add or subtract anything that you think. So our overarching objective is to get your goals and objectives tempered with what folks who came before you wanted to do. You're going to hear from staff on what our progress is on, or hasn't been in some cases, excuse me, on those goals and objectives. And then towards the end, you'll get some recommendations from me. I'm not going to try not to give you too many, but I think that there's certainly some that I've developed that I think could be helpful to you as you guide your this process. And then finally, what we want to come away with at the staff level, and we encourage you to work with us on this, is to really pay attention to the prioritization of your goals and objectives. And to that extent, what we're going to do is, rather than get into a public debate about what's more important, we're going to, at the end of this session, staff's going to go back, compile everything that we've heard tonight, get everything in one document that is a draft working document, recirculate that to you, and then we propose to have an anonymous scoring metric, which each of you anonymously can score and put in your product. And we are still designing the scoring system, and that information is something that we would compile for the final report for your review and approval, so that each of you will be able to add your individual prioritization to what you're going to hear, because I think you're going to get a lot of everything, and the hard part of this is going to be to get it to a manageable group. So with that, that is the, any questions on the outline or the 3 stages of the work? Okay, fantastic. So the first thing is that it's in the first part of this, I'd like to go around the room, and I'm not going to do this in any particular order, so I want to sort of pick and choose. But I'm going to ask you as your first sort of question here tonight to tell us what you see as the top 3 challenges or overarching goals and objectives that you think that the board should wrestle with over the next couple of years. I'll ask for a volunteer to go first this time, and then I'll pick later. So again, what we're looking for is just to start the discussion. Top 3 things, or if you prefer, the top 2 things that you think are challenges or important to the community, to the town system.
I'll go because you keep looking at me.
I know he wants to get to the economic development side, so we're going to get
No,
there.
that's not number 1.
It isn't? Okay. I want
My
that.
first priority and goal is to lose 15 pounds. I need support. With cookies and candy.
We don't have to capture that one.
All right. But Mark is actually right. One of my deepest concerns, wrong wording, is economic development. As we all know, our grand list is nothing to tout. It's really got diddly squat for growth. Our expenses are exponentially expanding. Our grand list is floundering. I think we need to focus on economic development. It doesn't mean I want to bring Walmart to the Andy Shopping Center, but it does mean we need to bring some commercial or industrial, to be frank, components into our environment. A lot of it spears off of economic development, so that's definitely a big header for me. I do feel some of the other initiatives are just conservation of our town character. Now, there's a lot of stuff that is not in our purview, but there are some things that are in our purview. And I think one of the things that I'm most proud of Simsbury for is our legacy as far as residents. People live here not for years, for generations. And when you meet people, they're always like, hi, 36 years. You know, it's always like right out there how long they've been committed and a part of our town. And, you know, I of course have been here longer than anyone else. But on a serious note, I have seen it really develop from my childhood farming community into the town I'm proud to be a part of today. But I do see us with the way we have grown so fruitful, many people want to pick our trees, so to say. A lot of people are coming at us with a lot of ideas, and just conserving our town character, which is also a component of the PLCD, to be frank, is something that I feel, albeit we can't do anything directly to just like spearhead and target this and hit a nail on the head, I do feel it has to be in our purview of our goal setting that one of the things we do is protect our town character. My third thing, which differs from some of the other selectmen, Wendy, is a prioritization of town charter review. We are in our 8th year and we haven't begun talking. I'm not saying we need to have the commission, the town charter commission, designated tomorrow. But I do feel that we are behind the ball as far as refining our vision. You know, we had a first selectman form of government. I'm not sure if it was the full 345 some odd years. Kevin, you know, right? How long was it?
No, the last one was like only 100 and something. So, yeah.
The last what?
The last charter with the previous form of
Okay.
selectmen.
So my point is, we switched to the town manager form, which, to be frank, I support. Good for you, Mark. But we haven't refined it. Since we did that major shift, we never circled back and said, what nuances can we fix? And I don't think we need to rewrite the whole town charter, but I do think it's overdue for some refinement. So those are the 3. Was I supposed to have 3?
That was perfect. 3 is always good if you can get 3. As a facilitator, I'm happy with 3. But if people have 2, that's also, you're going to see some overlap on this. Wendy, do you mind if I go to you next?
Sure.
Okay.
So, it ties into economic development, but it's something that I thought about a lot last year, and it's really affordability for all of us to be able to stay here. So, you know, if the people on my side of the, you know, kids are out of school, I don't want to leave Simsbury. I'm not moving to Florida. I want to stay in town. but we also have people that, you know, we have all different income levels in this town, and I think that making it affordable, I'm not talking about affordable housing, I'm talking about, you know, how economic development ties into that, taxes, you know, however we can generate revenue, the big picture, to keep people here that want to stay here, and to people want to move here, if, I guess, we have to be able to afford it to move here, but that's just something that I feel like is a big challenge that we're going to be facing over the next X years. And it came up, just a sidebar, at the, you know, last year's budget, the Board of Finance presented to the public. One of the big things that they talked about was, what town do we want to be? Do we want to be a town that you throw your kids through school and then you leave because you can't afford to stay here? Or do you want to be a town where people can move back and stay and raise their kids, can stay here after they've raised their kids? So that's just kind of a branch that it really goes into the other branches. The other thing that I always bring up is a big thing is public safety and health and welfare, and you know that's again a big topic. But you know, people live here because of the safety of the community, and I attribute that a lot to our PD. But we also have cultural programs, health, you know, social services programs, and things like that. And I feel like there's a lot within that realm that is really critical to keeping up at a level, you know, for the residents. And then my last thing that I'm sure we're repeated is really as government officials, the whole transparency of what we do, making what we say and do accessible, making sure our technology, website, you know, what tools we use to do what we're doing is easy for people to get into, find what they're looking for, and understand what we're doing and where to go to understand, you know, how the budget works or what did the meeting outcomes say, instead of, you know, filtering through years and years of old crap, I guess. So those would be my three.
So just a clarifying question, if I could ask for my own interpretation. So Wendy, in your view, are there sufficient services and programs that make Simsbury the high quality of life destination that people want to do? Are you happy with the level of services, senior services, youth programming in general terms? Do you feel that there's room for improvement or expansion, or do you think generally the service level is adequate?
So I'm not the expert in the service level as far as, you know, that we've never really seen a measurement of what social services we're providing, and that's on my list is, you know, we have all these keep Simsbury warm and you know, all those things, and the social workers, who's rating how well we're doing in that space? And that gets into your metrics. I have no idea.
Exactly where I'm going. One of the things I think we could spend a little time on today is, you know, when I mentioned it at the top, is performance metrics. How do you measure? I mean, we can come up with all the goals and, you know, sound bites for what feels good to do, but how are you measuring that success? Is it a factor, you know, for example, affordability? You know, nobody agrees on what affordable housing really is, and that's one of the reasons why you don't see a consensus about particular strategies to address it, emerging as quickly or as efficiently as you could from governments that really are, if they want to be empowered to make changes, right? So one of the recommendations I would make is that throughout this, and hopefully it'll make it into your final goals and vision, is that we work together to come up with performance measures that not only measure the efficiency of town government and departments, not at the individual level, but certainly in terms of our contacts with the public, how timely we are at resolving things, but also performance metrics that measure success of the initiatives that you lead us to as Board of Selectmen members, right? So how we come up with those metrics, who's the keeper of the keys for those, how often are they reviewed, and so on. But certainly, you know, the annual budget process, and this was why I was really quite happy to start this job with Simsbury in the middle of the budget process. I think a lot of town managers would probably roll their eyes at that, but I found that it's really been helpful to me to get just dive right into the budget, because so much of what we want to do is tied directly to what we can afford to do. And as we're working on the budget, you know, the town manager's budget is due to you soon, we're feeling the pressure of, scarce resources. And, so that's something that we want to keep in mind as we go through. But thank you for those, Wendy, that's great. I guess I'll go around and ask, since you're random.
So random.
And I'm not left-handed. Did anybody know it was left-handers day the other day?
Yes, I do know that. Jonathan's a left-hander.
Is anybody left-handed?
Hey, look Are you?
Jonathan is.
So I'm knowing right to left. But anyway, so 3 things that you think are of particular importance.
So, and we've kind of already been mentioned, but I think the most important issue is the grant list issue. I think we need to figure out how to grow our grant list and do it in a thoughtful way that takes some of the burden off of our residential taxpayers. I think there are a lot of things that, a lot of needs that we have when it comes to our schools and the police station and a community senior center, and we need to figure out how to pay for them. And I think we're hitting a tipping point with the rate increases on our residents. People can say you move to Simsbury for the education, but our neighboring towns have just as good an education system. So, I think Simsbury and it's the character of Simsbury, and we have these open space and we have recreation areas that are incredibly appealing. This is a very appealing town, and the education is great, but at some point, are we taxing our way out of people being able to stay here and live here? So I think we need to figure out how to do that, and I think to Stephen's point, what I think we need to really think about and look at, what does Simsbury really have to offer to different types of businesses, and how do we attract them, but do it in the right way where we can still maintain that character of Simsbury, but allow us some new tax revenue sources that can help us pay for some of these things.
And when you say new sources of tax revenue, you're not meaning real estate and development.
No, I'm not.
You're talking commercial, retail, economic
commercial,
development.
retail, industrial, potentially, depending on, we have some locations where I think you could bring these businesses in and it would not change the feel of where you live. No, actually, to my next point, I think that the character of our town and what it looks like now and why people choose to live here is going to change and be out of our hands if we don't really have a plan in place, because I think that we have applications and things that come to us and they get siloed and looked at as their own thing and not the bigger picture. And I think we need to pay attention to how fast are we growing and in what way are we growing. What do we, representing our residents, what do we think that our residents want Simsbury to look like in 10 years' time, and in 15 years' time, and 20 years' time, and have a game plan to put that in place, because otherwise it potentially is going to be unrecognizable and not choose to move on. So I think we need to be thoughtful about that. And then again, I guess I have 3, so I can't say a little bit. But anyhow, I do agree with the transparency area and efficiency, and I think that also goes into, the grant list is the bigger problem, but if we're being more efficient and we have performance measures and, maybe we can obtain more grants, it just allows us to be more efficient and cost savings on that end of it. And also with the transparency part, I think that if we can make things easier for our residents to be able to find and see, I think an engaged and informed community makes for a better community. I think we have smart residents, and I think they'd like to be more informed and don't always know where to go and how to see things.
So just before we move on, a couple of just thoughts, stream of consciousness. One of the things about strategic plans, comprehensive plans, POCDs, these big sort of all-encompassing policy documents is that when a municipality decides to embark on that process, there's a lot of community outreach, a lot of opinions come to the table, but the document is intentionally designed to be a wide-ranging document that attacks many of the things that Heather's talked about. In my view, what I've seen is that's sometimes helpful is to take, in addition to a POCD or strategic plan approach, to take a more narrow focus on specific topics, top down, in this case, from the board of selectmen. Right? So it's pretty cool to see that, you talk about well, what's in your purview and what may not be in your purview. Reading between the lines, planning and zoning and things like that come to mind, right? So the elephant in the room is that, as we work through the process, keep in the back of your mind, or even in front of your mind, that you are the policy. You're the main policy for the town. And it is within your purview to issue or pass resolutions or really just state of the board, letting your constituents know that this is a consensus of, where you're not stepping into somebody else's lane when you let the community know what this board's opinion is about something. Particularly careful about mentioning specific projects. You don't want to do that. But you certainly can talk to Heather's point about the risk that I sense you all feel, and I know the community feels, about the threat of change to your community. Right? And it's something that every community fears, even though many times the change is not as bad as is perceived by the folks that have grown up and lived here for generations. I think there's always a resistance to change, and we're not going to overcome that, and I don't think we should. But it is, I want you to take the approach, at least for our goal setting session, that pretty much everything is in your purview. As long as we're not talking about specific projects, specific developments, in general terms, you are empowered and elected to let me, as your town manager, know, and let your constituents know what your opinions are. And I think that's what we're starting to get to. So keep that in mind. Stephen, you're next on my, sorry about my right to my sweep of the room.
One of the best things that I could say is that there's not a lot of difference between what I heard already and what I would consider as priorities for the town too. I do think that obviously we have anemic growth. The challenge for us though too, even though expenditures aren't a significant problem that needs to be addressed today, without more growth, it will be a problem very soon. So we're going to have to start looking at what our expenses are, and our smallest part of the budget on the board of selectmen, but work with the board of education as well, and just try to understand what those expenses really look like and how that's impacting how attractive we are as a community, both for residents and for businesses. When we want to attract somebody here as either a corporate entity or an individual resident, that tax rate is going to be a factor, but so is the character and what services are provided. I hear a lot about the library and all those other things. I wasn't born here, but I married somebody who's from here. That's how, so I married Simsbury, which is great. I did eat it at 20 years last night. That's great. Okay, we're all set. But how we welcome folks to this community is a challenge for us. We welcome you here as a business. We want you to come here, but we want you to do business the way that we want you to do business. The business has to look like how we want it to look. And we probably say that, or don't say it directly, but to people that want to come here too. So I think that's something that we want to think about and be intentional about when we set these priorities and put them on paper, how we actually implement them and how we empower other volunteer boards or town staff to actually make something like that happen. I think is something we want to think about when we put it down. On budget and transparency and all that, there are practical tools that we can take advantage of. The AGA's Association for Government Accountants, they have a tool called Citizen-Centric Reports. I found it valuable. I think it's something that we could consider doing. We put reports out from the Board of Education now, and pie charts and other details. One of the reasons why we hear concerns about transparency in town is because things sometimes are difficult to find because staff and other boards are busy making the donuts every day and the actual work that we're doing. But I think setting up some templates and some expectations on where to find things and empower residents to be self-service, it will take less time for us in the long run on explaining how we got to somewhere because it's more easily discoverable. So I don't disagree a lot with anything I've heard so far. I do think the priority setting is going to be the challenging part for us. And eventually that anonymized response is going to have to be something that we can talk about with each other so that we can set the right priorities for us and where each other stands. So I know that you're next. So
Kevin, before we move on, just a question. Do you see an opportunity for expanded use of technology to get any of those efficiencies and some of the greater transparency that we could look in your travels? Do you think that technology is an issue for the town?
So honestly, we have a pretty affluent town, and we have a benefit from a lot of educated residents as well. I don't think that technology is necessarily a panacea for us to solve the issue. Sometimes pretty basic standard, like I mentioned, the citizen-centered report, kind of things or other details like that. It's just somebody having the intentional thought about an infographic and what it looks like, and you can convey that, digitally through technology or a PDF or, out in the corkboard. It doesn't have to be very technological to explain something in a way that's understandable to the person who's trying to communicate.
One of the things that we rolled out in Poughkeepsie was a citizens dashboard for budget, which is a useful tool, and folks had asked for it, but it allows members of the public to more easily see exactly where their taxpayer, tax dollars are going and so forth. So that was why I asked that question. I think in terms of website operations and so forth, much of our website and certainly our calendar is semi-automated. That's why we can miss things from time to time. And I appreciate your comment that the staff is often making the bagels, and that's very much true. It's not a when transparency issues are raised, our first thought at the staff level is, well, there's nothing nefarious about it. Somebody just didn't get it on the calendar or whatever. And sometimes the public perceives that as a lack of transparency. And really, as you say, it's just some resident or they were busy. But thanks for those comments. Diane?
Well, I'm in agreement with a lot, and I will say that economic development has always been a priority for me. Not just attracting those businesses, as we've talked about, but doing it in the right way that is responsible for our town and in the right place so that we can offset tax burden on the residents, because I think that's really, really something that we hear a lot. But I also now, again, talking purview and understanding that we are not land use, and this isn't about land use, but I do think if we can either charge others or talk about an actual housing and business development plan. Because you talk about, if we don't do this, if somebody doesn't take charge of it, it's gonna happen whether we want it, and it's not gonna happen the way we want. And a plan is multi-tiered and multi-year. So it's not about a specific development happening now or a specific business happening now. But if we don't actually start creating a plan of what we want our housing to look like, what we want our town to look like, what we want our businesses to look like, like you said, somebody is gonna decide for us. So do we then charge the appropriate places? How do we start this? I do feel like it's important for us to talk about these issues so that we understand what it is we want, so that other boards and commissions then, when they're looking at applications that are out of our hands, it's within the plan, kind of like the POCD, but it's specific to housing and to business development, and taking parts of that, but really expanding on it, and not just the niceties, very specific plan of what we want and how we get there. And that's hard to do, and I understand that's a big charge. Something that I talk a lot about is our grants, the lack of grants that we get in our town. And I know we leave a lot of money on the table, both at the state level and the federal level, which would help as we go in to address some of these other issues we have. If we had some grant money to put into an economic development plan, or public safety initiatives. That, that would help us, so again, it's not burden on our taxpayers, and we're offsetting some of those costs. I think we do really, it's not necessarily our job to look, but I think it's something we need to champion, is to focus on getting grants. I've got a couple of that are on my plate currently, and, people want to skirt it, people want to sidestep it. I will say that I know we do have some data on like senior for those that have answered it, but that communication piece is how do we get to really hear from our residents more, and we did a whole senior survey, and we did our best to try to get answers from as many seniors as we possibly could in every different area of town, in every different economic pocket in our town. We sorely have a lack of answers in those 50 to 70 or 65, because most of us don't think of us as seniors. But are we really getting representation and a voice of what matters? So to look at those metrics, we have a starting point, but we don't have them in everything. And I do think we have some great services here in town, but I feel like they're very siloed. And you talk about inefficiencies within our town, which could go to charter revision or charter tweaking, but we do have a lot of inefficiencies amongst different boards and commissions, but also services that are siloed within their own unit that could be shared services or crossover services amongst different town departments, so that the residents have more opportunities and have the availability of these services and access. Access is key, not only to information but to the services that are needed, because I feel like many people don't feel that they have access to what we actually have to offer.
Or they don't know that it's.
They don't know it exists.
Available.
Correct.
Good point. So just a couple of thoughts on that, and particularly putting it in context with what we've heard from others, and that is that, we know we've had a grand list problem, we've heard that 3 times. It is incumbent, I think, upon us to work on the economic development front in a way that encapsulates the housing issue as well. And part of the thing I think I would encourage us to land on is marrying 2 or more of our challenges into one potential path to solution, right? So with more economic development comes a need for more workforce housing. I always have said in my career that we need housing, no matter where we are, you need housing at all price points. It's not just an affordable issue, it's also, frankly, a market rate issue. The idea that future developments should encompass mixed use seems to be the trend around the country, and it makes sense because you've got retail, or you've got, most of the time it's retail on the ground floor and apartments above or something like that. But with respect to grants, I think you all know my sense, you're going to see it in my proposed budget, getting a grant writer on staff. Whenever we propose, I think, at least in my office, an increase in spending, you're going to see some that are necessary to maintain the status quo. And you're going to see 1 or 2 that are designed to address some of these problems, like we know that the storm is coming. Whether the costs are driven by the school side and special education, or whether they're driven by rising salaries in PD, or whatever it may be, we know that it's never going to get easier. Every year, you will continue to see pressure that puts pressure on your taxpayers by way of the annual tax increase. And that's something that I think is going to find its way into the top, first few issues is, affordability means affordability for your taxpayers, as well as for your renters, and as well as for your businesses. And it really is a challenge that permeates the entire specter of everything that we do in local government. So I'll just tell you that from the economic development perspective, and we can talk more about it, the town doesn't have an economic development director per se, or someone that is individually challenged with doing it. Now, some would say, and I'm new to the gig, but I know some would say Simsbury is really not big enough to have a full-time resource dedicated to economic development, and therefore it should continue to rely on its expertise. external partners that we have. And so I hope we can spend a little time later in the evening talking about specifically what you would like to see us do on the economic development front to address the concerns that we're starting to hear about. Also, from a service level, providing services to your constituents, to the citizens of Simsbury, focus a little bit more on what you don't like than what you do like. And are you happy with the status quo? If that's the case, whether it's senior center or youth services or whatever else, or the arts, then let us know that so we can build it in. If you're not, that's where the prioritization gets a little bit difficult because everything demands money. I think we can all agree that we want to work with our other boards, the Board of Ed, the Board of Finance particularly, to mitigate tax increases. So we're all going to do that. But sometimes you have to spend money lately. So you got to hire a grant writer, and the metrics are going to show does it pay for itself or not. You can go with that in 1 year or 2 at the most. Same thing might be said for a dedicated resource on the economic development side, right? And that's something we can talk about more.
Because economic development and supporting these, larger tax-based businesses that we may want to entice to get here, we also want to at the same time support our small businesses that are existing on Main Street and throughout town, because we can't keep the tax burden on them, take it off their backs, but we also don't want them to go under because we're supporting a large business.
Well, I would say, at the risk of giving you my opinion, but the elimination of the motor vehicle tax just kind of hit us pretty hard this year, right? More than $1 million in the change in the mill rate. So, okay, very good points. Curtis, you're up. Now, you can't say any of the ones that they said. You gotta give me at least one new one.
Well, I think that you started by saying, why did you run for office? And the reason I ran for office was because I was frustrated with the technology. I couldn't find any information on what's going on in town. You apply for boards, you don't get back to anyone, and when you talk me into it. But, so
it's her fault.
Yeah, it's her fault. I blame her a bit. But the technology side, I think, is making things clearer. I mean, similar to what has been said previously, making things easier to understand. I'm in the area of data and analytics, so having that information up right in front of you, easy to understand, easy to digest, makes it much better. Our website seems like it's an older style website to be brought into the future.
Well, one of the things, not to interrupt you, but one of the things that I was kind of encouraging you to talk a little bit about technologies is that, from my vantage point, those are things that could definitely be addressed in the short term. Right? Some of them are easy fixes. So if we're looking for a little bit of low-hanging fruit technology. There's, it's not a lot of money to tweak websites and to have a more active presence on social media and certain other things that we could do in conjunction with you. But go ahead.
The next thing would be, in the sports side, athletics for the town sports. One of the things I hear from people is that it's embarrassing our field situation. Our town, people go to Farmington, they go to Avon, they go to other places, and the fields are so much better. And they say, well, Simsbury has all this money, but we have the worst fields in the area. Why is that? Why is that the case? So trying to either understand why that's the case or push towards getting something more usable, like short-term and long-term. So whether that's new athletic fields or just resodding certain fields.
From what I've seen, and I could be wrong first, but I think that maybe what you're expressing, certainly it's real because I'm hearing it and seeing it, but it may just be a function. It may be as easy as it having been a function of past boards prioritizing those fields lower on the total.
Yeah.
When it asks to add positions or whatever. So I don't know that we can revisit those decisions necessarily, but if the board emphasizes and directs us as part of its goals and objectives to look at that, then I would certainly encourage it. Because by all accounts, we should have as good or better as those other towns that you mentioned. So, but go ahead.
No, I would say Simsbury Farms is a great facility, probably the best facility in the area.
Yeah.
But the actual team sports in town, I think. So that would be one thing. And just I have kids in school, so just to be sure that the education stays high level, that they have everything they need, that there's no issues as far as personal, going through a wild time in this country. So if we can be sure that, everything's been civil, everything stays civil, it'd be great. So those are the reasons why I ran it, was just more of kind of, helping people communicate what their needs are, and then, moving forward, things that I think we should do.
Great, good. Any other last thoughts before I'm going to just summarize these? Good. Okay, so in no particular order, but top down, we heard economic development, which I think is going to be something that will continue to resonate throughout the day. When we talk about town character, my takeaway from that is protecting the character that we have. I'm not hearing that we want a different character, but that we're concerned with the gradual erosion of our town character, and maybe that is caused by a whole number of social factors that are beyond our control, but we certainly know that change is coming. We talked briefly about the charter revision, and I do like the word that Diana used, tweak, and I think Stephen, you said it too. We're not talking about a complete revamp of the charter. That work was largely good, and I certainly think resulted in positive changes. But what happens is when municipalities change their charter, they often don't go back behind that process and clean up. There's things in the code, for example, there's things in policies and procedure manuals throughout the building that just don't make any sense, given the change in government. And so that cleanup would give you an opportunity, I think, to look at particularly some of Lee's recommendations and a couple of your own. And so the question, I think, for the board would be, what's the timing of that? And we could talk more about that when we try to divide things into short term and longer term. Affordability, we just reviewed affordability from the perspective of not just housing affordability, but incentives and opportunities for new businesses to come to Simsbury, and for our services to remain accessible and affordable to the extent there are fees. Wendy brought up obviously something that we're all concerned with, which is public safety and health and welfare. In Simsbury, public safety kind of, to me anyway, it encompasses some of the quality of life issues that are so important to our residents and your constituents. So the one thing I would ask Franklin to add to this list is quality of life. And we can, because I think you'll see that a lot of these things touch on quality of life issues. And so I'm going to add that one if you don't mind. Transparency, again, our thinking on this and our takeaway is going to be that to the extent we can use technology to improve transparency, do a better job with our website, media, and public engagement, I think that would be fantastic. I think, too, that we can depend on certain members of the community, not just here, but all around the country, to tell us when we are failing when it comes to transparency. So we kind of do have a built-in safety mechanism. We're going to get an email if we're not transparent. So that reminder, I think, is a good one, and frankly, I encourage it to point out where the town can do a better job, particularly when it comes to communicating with residences. A big one for us on the town side is efficiency. It's something that we're digging into, and we'll look at more carefully after the budget is done. But shared services, obviously, you're going to see that mentioned in the goal setting of your predecessors. I think there was a lot of effort and discussion around shared services. That remains something that we want to continue to talk about. I think you also mentioned at least the perception that pockets of programmatic or support services are siloed. And to the extent that we can centralize some of that information in the town manager's office, I'm willing and eager to do that. So I will say, and it's kind of just anecdotal, I haven't been everywhere yet, but even I'm seeing that, oh, this is over here. Why isn't it also over here? Or why do I have to go over there to know this when really it should be over here? So even I, as a town manager, am seeing, I think, a little bit about what they're talking about when it comes to operating in silos. The budget, well, as you know, you're going to be getting my budget shortly. Challenges there, just briefly, are nothing that you don't already know. But as relates to goal setting, an overarching goal of the board should be to help support our efficiency seek. So, for example, Brent Reiter we're going to come to you and ask you for support for that position. And we're going to ask the Board of Finance for support for that position as well. And there's other internal fixes that we think will help the overall efficiency of the organization, but might cost a little money. And you know, through Wendy and Personnel Subcommittee, we will bring those forward to incorporate into the goals that we come up with today. So attracting residents, and you know, our objective isn't to recreate or rewrite or alter the POCD, but you know, please continue to think about how we can continue to make Simsbury a wonderful place to live, work, and play, and attract those new residents. At the same time as you work to narrow down our economic development goals and our housing challenges. We talked about funding and grants. We're all on the same page on that, and I'm glad to hear everybody understands that, you know, even richer communities are entitled to get something. And I think that there's been, over the last several years, a fair amount of funding available, particularly from the feds, that maybe we have not been able to leverage as successfully as we could. Resident feedback and engagement, you know, community involvement and community engagement is something that I would love to see come out of this as one of your goals, because each of you individually has a constituency and thousands of friends and folks you know that you can help individually spread the word about what the town is going to do and what we plan to do together to continue to bolster community engagement and feedback. We talked about the technology. You know, Curtis, I come back to you in the athletic fields, and you know, some of this is capital, obviously, so it comes down to a talk about money. What I would suggest is that after we get a consensus around goals and objectives for the next couple of years, that those of you on the board that are interested in talking specifically about some capital projects, whether it's, you know, PD or a senior center or new fields, that we maybe break out a group of you that are interested in talking about those longer term goals, because obviously those are expensive and require a lot of community education and support, right? Protecting Simsbury's high quality of education. You know, I've had a couple of meetings with Matthew, and I'm in the process of touring all the school facilities, and so I'm still learning. But everything I've seen is telling me what you all know, and that is that protect that at all costs. And in order to do that, the emphasis really does need to be on economic development, because, as we said, the grand list is not grown. And that is, frankly, I think, your biggest challenge, because without the money, we're going to continue to face scarce resources. I'm somewhat of an expert on scarce resources, as you know. It's not fun, but you know, we certainly can make those tough decisions when we need to. We're going to take just a 5-minute break, and then we're going to go to section 2, which is we're going to be reviewing the goals and objectives of your predecessors, and you'll hear from Tom and I about what we've been doing and what we have. So, quick break. Wendy,
Yeah, just
quick time out for Wendy.
just like at some point we're gonna like delve into these little higher level goals and some thoughts on potential actions or things that we want to work towards in the short and long term. Correct.
Okay.
That's not me. I tricked it over to somebody else.
Well, technically, we'll recess for 5 minutes.
Recess, yes.
As Bill, we want to spend a little bit of time just showing you, and some of you have seen various pieces of this in other forms, but I'm going to ask Tom to spend a couple minutes reviewing with you what were the outputs of the prior board relative to goal setting and how far along we've come with respect to some of this. Huh?
Yeah, so I guess I can try and go from top down, hopefully. Let's skip a few. But so the first one, the long range planning, capital G, BOS, BOF, and BOE. We actually had sat through 12, which you guys saw, our 12-year plan. While we've gone back to our 6th year, it did let us look at the long range needs and help us kind of see that we're getting from the school and other things from town that we would need. And it's still ongoing through what we do, but we have. So that 12-year plan serves that basis. Our shared services, right now, most of the finance department is sharing, working in between both floors with town hall. Our IT works with central office of the town hall side. I think they do a lot with the school, but if anything's there, they'll work with. Our employee benefit consultant, when we started about 5-6 years ago, we brought in locked in through an RFP process. And we just had a meeting with them last week, we meet quarterly with the board ed side, town side, really looking at our health insurance for self-insured, so making sure the plan, including and all that, and how we costs are there.
I have a question now, if you don't mind. On shared services, have we ever looked into shared services like the Board of Ed does and like SBAA is actually doing with the mutual aid plan? Have we ever looked at shared services amongst different communities? Not just shared services within town, but shared services within communities?
Yeah, we had one position, our deputy building official, for a couple of years was that with Bloomfield. They spent 60% of the week in Simsbury, 40% Bloomfield, and then the next week reversed it. That person actually then became the building official in Bloomfield. And then they, Bloomfield let us know about a year and a half ago that they would continue agreement.
Okay.
And at that point, they were paying for the 40% for the building. So it is something that we have, kind of a framework and experience for. We just don't currently have a position like that.
But whether it's a position or shared services, I'm just wondering if it's something that, I don't know if you have any experience with, but it's something we may want to explore, whether it's a personnel position or other shared services amongst other, like towns, that is a cost saving, so it's not, we're burdening the entire cost on ourselves. Because I know, for example, that the Board of Education, we do that, particularly around special education, but even with other specific, at the high school, they have STEM and some other things that are shared amongst different districts. So I just wonder if it's something we can do as a town.
It's something I think that we're always looking at.
Mm-hmm.
I know in our budget meetings this year, we had a person come and ask for a person, and I brought up, is there something we could split with another town?
Mm-hmm.
Some positions easily can, some through internal kind of admin processes, it's hard to split it. But it is something we're always looking at.
We do some sharing on procurement and things with the COG, right? With
Yeah,
the
CROG, they'll do a lot of, and they're a 38 block, in capital regions, so they do a lot of purchasing, so that helps, as well.
Can I just weigh in on top too? CROG is actually, under that part, shared services, like you said, one of their big things, and they look at even animal control, and there's a whole bunch of topics that they're looking for other topics, so everything.
And there's some grant opportunities too that they offer to incent communities to do that. So, yeah, it's a good point, Diana. We will continue to be looking at that.
Yeah, and they've started doing this, with the acronym, the RTED, so it's kind of for, multiple towns for positions that are hard to fill. And they're, so it's been assessors and building officials and patrols recently to kind of assist in multiple areas. Currently, we have all those positions filled, so we haven't really joined in on that initiative, but they're starting kind of, they got to see money from the state, start the grant for and then the towns do have to start contributing more and more for it. But so they're starting to do those key positions, and I can see that growing for others.
Yeah.
Do you need the manager?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, didn't mean to interrupt.
How you doing, Chief? Everything okay?
Everything's good, thank you.
Good man. Thanks for stopping by.
So we don't want to do the police thing anymore, is that?
We're gonna have to cut that.
It sounded like good timing.
This doesn't work out. Good to see you, Chief. Carry on, Todd. Got a few more.
So the other shares are park container, Board of Ed pays for a couple of park, we need at least one, maybe two park containers to help maintain their athletic fields. The trail, we all know the trail that happened at the Terriffill Bloomfield connector. On work is continuing, CROG for that, back in the fall, there's a big presentation, kind of the next phase of that, so that's a key, project that is undergoing. The police staffing study, the study was done, so now it's kind of starting the changes that were recommended, and reviewing those and see how feasible they are and what we want
When
to
did
do.
you circulated that to, excuse me, Tom, to all the new board members?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
And that kind of touches on other studies that we also kind of have out there as well. So we have a couple of studies done, and just kind of doing this set. The Main Street MOU, signed in September or October, one of those months. Currently it's through June of this year, so we're going to an extension will be needed, and kind of with the next phase of the partnership and Simsbury relationship is and how that goes forward, helping both parties there. And then the Terrifield Village Plan, the RFP is out. I believe responses are due next week or end of this week or next week. So George is working on that and planning. And I know he has plans to then continue that over for kind of each kind of villages throughout the town after this process. Draft ordinance regarding cannabis was done, and then referendum kind of vacated that out, so that's all off the process. And then invest in our workforce through professional development. So last year, the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance voted to add money to this department, to the budget. And that was one, we could tell the morale boost for staff for that. We have very qualified staff, not just in the department level, but the division head and other levels throughout the organization. And continuing to invest in them helps all the residents that use it. Lets them go to conferences, whether it's just in the state or regional or national, and learn more to bring back to the organization and benefit to residents.
Can you talk to me a little bit about that? Like what have you seen? Like what departments? Is it managers only, or are there other credentialed staff that are over the things?
Yeah, so I know the library budget, I believe, got added 2,000 last year, so I think it was going from 2 to 4. So it allowed more to go to, an extra person to go to, I think, the national,
Okay.
and then more to go to the state kind of association.
Okay.
I know town clerks goes through, they do their Connecticut Town Clerks Associations, I think that's quarterly. In our office, we go to Connecticut Town Ed Association for quarterly. We go to cost, we go to a few others, and then our budget allows, currently it's in there for the management deputy, we go to our national organization every year. The offices have gone a while, transition, but that's in there as well. And we have a professional job, so the department comes through and says, I have funds and want this person to go here. Then if it kind of pay budgeted and come back and show what the actual program is for. And we make them print out the flyers so we know like, what they're actually going for, not just sending them off to some location. And I know planning or super planners that advantage of that too. Planning conference.
So I know that Tom Roy, I think, went to PPWA, and I don't know if you can go to ICP or not, or that are there others within the departments that go as well, or is it just managers like that?
No, we have a few, I think library tries to send the kind of division heads, they might send another step down, so your head of borrow, your head of children's, your head of adult. I know in my old role as mental specialist, I was going to the CTC meetings, and I was in there. So it is kind of one staffing availability, and then kind of have these departments.
Thank you.
And then we also budget for executive kind of coaching. So we have a person that a lot of staff is, some departments I've ever worked with, who really like him and at one of our leadership retreats, and he offers executive coaching. So we had some department heads and division heads reach out to kind of individual 6-9 session training, how to kind of teaching them how to be managers.
Sure.
So that they can be effective.
So when an employee comes back from a conference, is there something in place where they then meet with the rest of the department to, or put, I don't know the presentation, but how does that information get debriefed so that all the employees can benefit from what that person is doing?
I don't know if I can speak for every department on that. I would guess so. So I know for me, for example, over the summer, I went to a CTCMA, our annual conference in June. And after attending, having my notes down, took my phone and sat down and read about 30, 45 minutes and kind of said, here's the topics that I saw most interesting, here's other things for you. So I think each department might do it slightly differently, but I would guess that they do sit down and do this.
Another question on that, this came up too, that there's always a talk about certain levels of people doing those 360 reviews. And at the time, the board, we were told that nobody needs to act on what they learn in the 360 review, it's only for the person who gets the results. And I've been learning in class that that's not necessarily how you always use a 360, so I guess if we continue to do 360s, there should be some way to make sure whatever is presented is worked on with that leader as to improve their quality, and I don't know if that's, if we're still doing those, or if we only did that for a short period of time.
Yeah, I don't know if we've really done that outside of that one time. And when we work with that, when some staff work with that individual kind of executive coaching, usually this is a DISC assessment. And so then that result is kind of shared between staff member and the facilitator. It might go to the department head, but I think people do have to sign off on that. And that kind of shows your compatibility in different areas that you might go with. It lets you know like, your personality with this person and this other personality with this. Sometimes in a class you have to recognize that, be aware of that, and work on it. But we haven't used a 360 valve across the organization for multiple people.
So just keep us moving. So what we'd like to do is, and you've got more information on the broader goals here of your predecessors in your packets, but what we'd like to challenge you to do now is just take a look at what we've got on the screen, and we would like to carry forward anything that this board believes, as we do, there's certain key things here that should be continued and incorporated in this board's vision and priorities as well. I'll just editorialize that, we did create an MOU with the Main Street Partnership. I'm not sure, as I stand here, that MOU is what we want, if it's all encompassing, if it needs to be strengthened, broadened, clarified, or at the very least made more long-term, because my understanding is it's just a one-year deal, is that right, Tom? So, that could be something that I think you might want to move over, but interested in hearing any thoughts that you have. And Franklin's going to carry these over to what we're going to continue to be working on. Any thoughts on any of these?
I have a question actually about the last one. Why can't we do Survey Monkey for an employee satisfaction survey?
We can and we will. Next question.
Okay.
Let's do it. That's it. That's easy.
That's a good idea.
That's not a budget item. It's higher.
Yeah.
Well, everybody is aware that we did, and thank you for the funding. Those of you that played a role in that, we've got GovHR on staff to do, and GovHR is going to be, they're not interviewing everyone, but they're interviewing representative members of each classification as part of that employment study. And I think they're going to come back to us with some feedback that will shed some light on, what folks really think about what they're doing and whether it meets with their job specs and so forth. So maybe in the summer after we see that, we could Survey Monkey is great. I love Survey Monkey. Anything else from this main list from your from the preceding board?
Yep.
Wendy?
I have a hand up.
Yeah.
I'm just
Jump in.
So a couple of things that I still think are a priority is the trail, the multi-use trail
Yeah.
connectivity.
Right.
Filling in that gap, and also keeping on top of this charrette rezoning for Terriffill, because that's just starting,
Yeah.
and we don't know what that looks like, and we want to know what that's going to look like, right? Because from the residents, those are my two big ones. Obviously, the prioritization of the master plans and financial services; those are kind of like just all over the place. And the one that I don't know if we want to revisit, or that's why I'm just going to say this here. And I put that in red on here, is the DEI initiative, because we keep carrying that forward. We want to be DEI initiatives, we want to develop a vision, but we haven't developed any vision, and we have the DEI Commission asking us to be involved in this data project that we funded 3 years ago, which is still slowly going there, and I think will require more money and more analysis and more data. So I'm just putting that there. I'm saying I'm not sure we want to go, what we want to do with it, and that's the only reason I'm calling it out, is that I don't know, so.
I'm confused, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm confused about what the red light, yellow light, green light means. We're not gonna move forward a red one, but we just talked
I
about
think
careful
it
catch
was,
for green. So
yeah, it's a great question. So the red may indicate that there's a sense that we're not pursuing it as diligently or as intended.
Okay,
It's not to suggest that we don't do it.
exactly.
It's
Right, in a good place.
Right.
Okay.
So in that respect, I think, and Wendy, we might want to circle back and have just a 5-minute on DEI because it deserves its own
Yeah.
conversation,
Okay.
which I think is appropriate to have in terms of our visioning because that's one of these things that touches everything or potentially touches nothing, which is
Yeah, exactly.
the other problem with DEI that I'm seeing. So, okay, anybody else with Curtis? I knew
So
you
we're
were
gonna circle back around to DEI.
We are.
Okay.
I'm gonna try to just put a DEI at the bottom so I don't forget.
I would put DI higher. We had a conversation with them on Friday,
Yeah,
and I think it's something we definitely need. I actually think it needs a little bit more money. The costs are increasing, and the things they do are really important.
yeah.
I think we need a little bit more.
And I don't disagree with you. I don't mean to deprioritize it. I just want to pull it out of what we're talking about
Right.
for the moment.
Because I think we need to understand,
Yeah, that's
have an understanding of it, so that.
Yeah, but it deserves its own conversation. But what I thought you were.
Oh, yeah, that's for those the fields, yes.
You know,
I would say
I was going to speak for you on that. So Curtis is going to move over the prioritization and implementation of parks and open space and athletics. Right? Yeah.
So the two turf field initiatives, I agree with. I think that falls under economic development, and we need to think of what do we do with the results that we receive, or that we find out from the plan.
The plan.
The plan. And I also think filling in that gap puts us on the map as maybe that lightning part of the East Coast Greenway. And there are a lot of benefits to having that designation. So I would like to see those two move forward. In terms of the shared services, where do you think that we are with that? Because that's definitely an area when we look at efficiencies. If we have different departments that can share a position, where do you see in your
Well, I don't want to
time
steal.
you've been here so far?
I don't want to steal our own thunder in my office, but as part of the budget talks, we were faced with a lot of asks. And the question when we come in front of you and in front of the BOF is going to be, well, what did you cut? We just added. We cut a lot if you look at what folks have requested and what staff have said justifiably should be done or could be done. A good example to your point is that instead of putting in part-time positions in tax, assessment, and city clerk, county clerk, we're proposing one FTE that's a shared service. And we're going to speak with the union about that to make sure that doesn't run afoul of anything on the collective bargaining side. But this was actually Tom's idea to, as we were brainstorming over, how do you prioritize three relatively similar in terms of their workloads. And what we realized was something that grew out of an old discussion about the possibility of sharing and integrating tax and assessment, which I'm not proposing. But when you realize that those divisions, departments have different calendars and different busy seasons, it lends itself naturally to coming to you with one FTE instead of 3 part-timers or 2 full-timers or whatever. And so shared services is not just between us and other towns, not just between us and the Board of Ed or outside stakeholders, but can we share positions internally, and we're going to continue to focus on it. So hopefully we can gain your support and BOF support for that one full-time employee, because the workloads in tax assessment and the city clerk are expanding, and we've also got a new retirement coming as I think folks may are tax population.
Can I add a couple things? So first of all, I did the colors in here. I
just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I wanted to tell you what I meant. So the red, basically the employee satisfaction survey came out of the last board. We tried to fund it in the budget to look at certain,
Right.
all things. It was pulled. The Board of Finance did not approve the funding, so that's why it's red. And then the DEI, that's been on the list for multiple years. But to me, it needs it needs to be defined before we carry it forward. I mean, that's why the red is there. Something has to happen to make it a meaningful goal or directive, in my opinion. Whether it's funding or, you know, whatever. Then the yellow, like I said, those are just things that I think are ongoing and they're capital needs and things. And then the green are things that we actually made progress on or completed. So not that they don't need to keep going, but that was the color coordination. One thing I wanted to just as a note to go onto the shared services, and this is just a sidebar. When we do the shared services and stuff like this, do we show the savings that we're getting when we do the
No,
shared
I
services?
think that's a great point, Wendy. We brought that up. We're gonna start tracking that. The other thing we're gonna do this year, the first year we do it, we're gonna track what the Board of Finance cuts, or frankly, what the Board of Selectmen cut. Because there isn't, other than the historical knowledge that staff have, they're still here with us. You know, as the new town manager, I wasn't able I wouldn't have been able to easily understand, well, what was previously asked and what was cut, and why was it cut? We don't want to revisit the same old issue if there was a valid reason, you know. So I'm trying to understand why, for example, in one budget, and I don't know when this was, additional cops were funded, but other positions that were requested by the town manager were not. You know, and there may have been very good reasons why that happened, and I'm kind of glad standing here that it did. But the fact is that we need to track the savings from shared services, and we need to kind of understand, well, why were things cut? So that if we want to revisit it later, maybe we can make a better case, you know, for that. If we know what prior board members found deficient in the question. I know that as we put a budget together, that asking for FTEs is always the hardest ask, because it's the most expensive thing. It's not just a one-time, you know, we're going to go buy some new computer equipment and we'll all be better off. So there's rightly a lot of scrutiny on position ads. I know at your last board meeting, PD and the police commission were asking for 17 records clerks. I mean, it's a kid, it wasn't 17. That gives the chiefs in the back. But you know,
You get records. You get records.
all joking aside, you know, the need is clearly there, and how do you marry the need with what our resources actually are? And that's where you have, I think, some of your hardest job. Okay, moving on. Is there anything else in here, Wendy? Give me the last word on this, because you were part of the prior board too. It is, you know, it's not our intent to kill anything that we're not moving over. It's just we want to narrow the focus so that at the end of this process, we have a manageable list of short-term objectives and maybe a less manageable list of longer-term objectives.
Well, there's just something on there, I'm just gonna point out, because
Yeah.
I'm involved in it, that really does, it's a no lift from this board, it's just a matter of continuing to support yes, please, supporting our seniors through efforts towards becoming an age-friendly community. That lift is on the Aging and Disability Commission and just looking for the, please continue to do so from the board. So it's not a cost and it's not a lift for us. So I don't see why that shouldn't continue.
That's great. And just as maybe,
Yeah.
I will just give you this advice and take it for what it's worth. But this board could pass a resolution urging them to do that. Or expressing, I used to do it in Poughkeepsie all the time. It's actually a little frustrating they did it so often. But expressing support for this, that, and the other thing. It's not specific action because it's in their purview. But you know, at least it's the expression of this board and your colleagues that you want to support. But I agree, and it doesn't need to carry over because it's almost something that goes without saying, right? And the same thing would be true with what we're proposing on the, invest in our workforce through professional development. You know, yeah, I was glad to see it on the list. It was something that everybody was focused on. I don't think it needs to make it to the new list, not because I don't think it's important, but because at some point, these things become matter of course. And as long as we all understand that in the budgets, we're all going to support our reasonable amount of professional development, I don't think we need to focus on that when we're trying to focus on economic development or housing or DEI.
Yeah, I also think, and when we started this process 2 years ago, I think we had a list of, I don't know, was it 80
It was a lot.
items? It was
Yeah.
very long. So I think you do need to have a concise list, otherwise potentially nothing gets done really, because if the list is too long and there's no real focus. So I think if we move too many things over from the last 2 years, it doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room for the next. So that's another thought.
I'm thinking, at the end, I don't want to jump ahead, but it may be that we have a follow-up session to get through the prioritization. But at the end, I want to be able to look at the list and say, as your town manager, we could probably accomplish 80%. We're never going to get all of it, but, I've got to narrow the focus a little bit as part of this process, and then we're all going to have to work on that prioritization. And then I think we're all holding ourselves accountable to be able to report back to the public and your constituents that you checked all these boxes. And some of them are heavy lifts. Economic development and housing are probably the two that jump out at me right away as being super challenging in just about any environment. So, okay.
You're going to turn over to me. I just wanted to make one more comment about the Main Street MOU. Steve mentioned it out there. I don't, like, whether it's an MOU or not, I don't think it has to be a separate thing. I think it just has to factor into this economic development vision that we're going to create, or what is there a goal for them instead of hiring a person, or can they help grant writing or something like that. So just, it may not be an MOU, it may be something broader or whatever.
So if you can hold that thought,
Yeah,
what we're going to do is, we've got a little bit of time. We're going to go through some of these big ones and narrow down, kind of drill down on what we're thinking, right? So certainly on DEI, we've got a conversation, the Main Street Partnership and Economic Development and housing, and we're going to we'll take care of the employee satisfaction. That you can cross that off there because we don't need to engage as a goal with that. So that one can come off, and everybody's in agreement on the trail connectivity. So we're good. What's that?
Athletic.
Oh, yeah, get the athletic fields on there, Franklin.
It wasn't just athletic. It was the master plan for Parks and Rec. Yes.
Okay, can I throw a theater out there, please?
You're going to have a chance to
Yes.
put it under the long-term goals. We want to hear about that as well. Good. Okay. Any questions on where we are so far? We're going to dig into housing, economic development, and a couple of other things. Wendy?
Yeah, I just wanted to, again, see, are we still on part 2 or are we moving to part 3?
We're still in part 2.
So are we gonna start diving into
Yep.
part 2? Okay.
Yep.
That was what I wasn't
You ready?
sure. Yeah, I wasn't sure we were gonna come, sure.
So what we've tried to do so far is synthesize your initial thoughts. These are the broadest issues that we've concerned with. This is our job to narrow this to what we're going to talk about now, and then we're going to get our takeaways on the third board moving like that. So I think, I'd like to start by drilling down on economic development a little bit and hear from all of you about what you think the next step should be. And both this encompasses a decision, a discussion about the Main Street Partnership. What, if anything, you'd like to see from me in terms of what I propose to you for the upcoming year budget? If there's some component of economic development that needs to be, did I touch this? Make sure. No, oh, you did. This is the opportunity, I think, for all of us in our shared budget process to think seriously about, do we want to put anything in our budget that specifically addresses our ability to move forward. So again, just to narrow our focus, we've got, I just penciled in 10 or 15 minutes on this, but we can expand the discussion if we need to. But focusing on what even started us out with economic development, to me means bringing more retail and potentially commercial businesses to town. So anybody have any thoughts about that?
I have one item that I'm looking at because it's been out there, and it's a performing arts center. So it was in our capital budget. It's been talked about for the last 2 years since I've been around. They're trying to build a band shell, and it is a capital item. It's on town land. We end up owning the building, right? We own the property. They're a nonprofit. They are in a position right now where they want to do this expansion. We got the $900,000 from the state. We've put in $350,000 on hold, and we've redone the parking lot. And it was going to be in the 24-25 budget, and we moved it out to the 25-26 budget. I guess the question is do we see that as something helping drive economic development downtown? Is that something we want to use town resources to help fund? Not all of it, because they're going to raise money on it. But I feel like it's either, think of the expression that I'm using in my head. It's like, are we going to do it or are we going to not do it, right? Or are we going to move it out for 4 years, we're going to lose the money that we have now? And that's just, to me, something that I think this board has to figure out what we want to do with that. That's very specific, but it still impacts the
It's
downtown.
timely. I met with Jeff today, in fact. You know, it was, that was my first meeting with him, that it got postponed because of snow. So, you know, and so I'm up to speed on this. You know, certainly the 900,000 is a gift of immense magnitude. But, you know, my takeaway so far is that the cost as proposed is exorbitant.
It is.
And, you know, realistically, you know, based on everything I know now, that number isn't going to work. So I need to hear more from all of you as you direct policy on this. Are we looking to make it work and put potentially a round peg in a square hole? Or are we looking to work with their board and other stakeholders to assist in raising money? There's a number of things we could do, but I'd love to hear from all of you. And Wendy, why don't you start? What are your thoughts? I mean, we agree it's very expensive.
So it's very expensive. So they said that, you know, it's like the chicken and the egg. They need to get an exact amount. They need to get a bid, so they can't really show exactly what it's going to really cost in the budget. And they also say they can't raise funds if they don't know what it's going to cost if we're going to kick in. So I guess the way I'm looking at it as either are we going to pony up any additional funds in the capital budget using reserves or something? And I don't want to get into a budget discussion, but is that something that we would have consensus on as something we feel is important to the town of Simsbury to move forward? Because if not, do we just say, you're not getting the band shell and stop worrying about it, give back the $900,000? Do we think that's something that would be meaningful to the downtown?
I think it'd be more likely to say yes to it if we could increase the amount of events, because there's only like 12 events a year, right? Something like that?
No, there's a lot, they're working on that. I mean, those would be conversations. Yeah,
Well, just so, like, my thought around that is like, if you get more use out of it, then it's worth putting more money in. But if there's not enough events there, then it's a lot of money for something that's not being used as much as.
See, and I would take the tack of, I think we need to relook at our agreement with them, and renegotiate our agreement with them so that if it's being built, it's not for the exclusive use of the PAC and for the events there. Although, you know, we understand, as written currently, they take basically residency of it from, you know, a specific time during the year. Now, the other time during the year, it's not really used. So there should be things that we have usable space for town residents to also use, or other organizations that we can rent out from and, you know, pay minimal income. But whether it's part of the community center or part of a, you know, or usage space for meetings or other rehearsal space, or, you know, so that you have town resident use rather than throughout the year, rather than just performing arts in the summer, I think would be better use for town funds, because then it's something, we own the property and the building to begin with, and we have an agreement with them to take residents during a certain part, but it's still town property. So we want to make sure that the residents, if money's being used, get to be able to benefit from that expansion.
So that is when we worked on the application to try to get the grant funding from the state. There was a few of us at the table, and the part of the sales pitch was it would have this space inside for the community to use. There would be office space included in these back rooms that we could use, whatever. And I do think the agreement might be a good place to look, you know, if we were to give more funding to see what the relationship is. But I'm just curious, is it a priority to people like?
So,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's done.
Sure.
Yeah, it's done.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just precluded what this is gonna be unpopular. But we gotta stop saying no to some stuff. I like the bin show, it's very nice. But we need to work on the grant list before we worry about how much more we can spend. This falls under, how much more can we spend? Would it be great? Yeah, excuse me. But heck yeah, you know, but beep. But I'm really concerned that it's like, we're not talking about $10,000. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. And right now, exactly. And right now, our agreement, as Diana alluded to, with the SPAC, I guess, well, I'll just abbreviate, is not a good deal. They rent it from us for $2,500, then they lose money, and then we give them the money they lost. So we're already losing money. It's already an expenditure. I sort of see this that we are throwing, excuse the term, good money after bad. You know, it has not had a good stewardship experience with us. And I just feel we need to start saying no to some things, not to be mean, but we have to pick our priorities. And speaking for the business community, just because of my role in our community, not because I'm trying to, take on more. When you talk to the downtown merchants, you would be hard pressed to find one of them ever utilize the term economic development. The term they would use is stifling. We barely fit that facility. Parking is a huge debacle. It blocks all economic activity, never mind development, already. We're talking about making it bigger and it's already broken. So it's not that I want to be the one that says no, but I don't think the time has come for this. And I think when we do get to that time, we're gonna have to talk about the parking situation. Potentially, we could put some gravel and do some clearing, which is gonna get some resistance there, because you're talking about, you're into the water, the setback area. Thank you. But I think we need to nip this in the bud. It's already been a negative cash flow, which concerns me because we're having problems financially. And it would be great to offer it. I just don't think until we have the money that we worry about having this opportunity. So that's my piece.
Well, let's not forget that they have huge accessibility issues.
Yeah. Well, there's a bunch of components. I just don't want to just poop on them. There's a ton of good, but there's also quite a bit of bad. And economic development being one of our focal points, I just want to bring up the point that the economics of this facility, ironically, are not a positive experience for most.
So we just don't put it on the list for now. I don't know.
Well,
Go ahead, speak against me. It's not.
I think I'm all
disagree.
economic minded, but I honestly think it's underutilized as far as, I think it's a town treasure. People love coming to town for it. It's something that, things that you sell Simsbury on. It's one of those things that you sell Simsbury on. We have the fireworks, everyone loves coming from out of town. It's a great thing. We love having it. But for me personally, I think just to make it either run it better or have more events or just charge more money just so that it's not so much taxpayer paying for it. But because everyone else in the region enjoys it. They don't have to pay the taxes on it. Granby, everyone comes into our events, but they don't have to pay for it. So,
And then have we looked at grants?
They got one. They got one.
Well, that's a state grant, but there's other.
They have applied. Yeah.
In January 2021, we applied for a DECD grant. Didn't get it, it was more of a job creation grant that we were applying for. And we reapplied and I hope we get in phase 2.
Yeah, because I
We
know there's
tried
like,
for that particular facility and it was for the phase 2 expansion.
because I know like the Greater Hartford Arts Council and there's a few, it's like apply for them through theater organizations.
We did apply for another, we tried through the federal one, but they said it was open to a certain day, but it was not, so we just sent that.
Because there are some capital improvement for arts organizations grants out there.
So you want? Okay.
My thoughts,
Go ahead.
so to Curtis and Diane, space to rent it out and utilize the asset to somehow offset the cost when we finally do this project, and that is a good thing. But the bigger concern I have to Steven's point is, I just don't think that we are in a position as a town to be adding expenditures and line items unless it actually is spending money to create an ROI or an efficiency for our town. Until we can grow the brand list, I just think it's hard to increase taxes on our residents for things that we don't necessarily need right now if it's not really going to do anything to help.
It'd be helpful for me, because I've been down there other times, and there's, athletic games or something happening there. It's not, arts and entertainment and stuff. If there was a utilization unit that's impacting sheriffs or if the town has it, I don't know what that is. But I do feel like the utilization there may be more than what I would otherwise imagine it to be, but I don't think that it's being utilized to its full potential, at all either. We know that there's times like right now where the weather isn't great and so the fields really aren't usable, but if there were, an adaptive use space there that, had accessibility, addressed that, Diana mentioned, that would be, helpful. I feel a little bit on the wrong side of the discussion because some of the other discussions already happened, so there was a design and a plan. But the biggest frustration for me, because spending is always difficult, and, I will be an advocate, here for us, just like you said, Stephen, to be cautious in spending. Sometimes, we have to say no. But I would want to be able to say yes if it was a good investment, and it could be a quality of life as a return, on the investment for us there. The biggest concern is what, I forget who shared it, it was you, Wendy, or Mark, saying that it was the car, the chicken and the egg kind of thing. I've been through capital projects before, that's just not the case, I'm sorry. You have to have a plan and a vision of what you want, and there will be iterations of that over time. But then you have to have the confidence and the ability to raise that revenue and that funding on their own. And what I have heard, outside of this meeting and then reinforced just now, is that they are not capable of raising their part of this project. The state is going to underwrite a part of it. We might ask the taxpayers to underwrite a part of it, but if they can't raise that revenue also to support that part of the project, that is what will threaten this, and it will leave the taxpayers holding back. Nobody wants to buy a car for their kid with a write the check and they own the liability, and that's what it sounds like we're doing here. We're going to write the check and then we will own the liability of the building without a real understanding of what the return will be. So I'm not opposed to the concept of the project. I think that it sounds exciting and interesting. It's a great bipartisan story for us that our two legislators in Hartford were able to work together to bring this here, but I don't think that it's fully baked for us to be considering. And so it's for us in the budget season to really make some hard decisions here, but it doesn't sound like there's a lot of confidence among this board right now in pursuing it as a top priority.
So how long do we have to use the 900,000 before it?
We'll check on that. It's probably 2 years. It could be 4.
25.
To
I thought it was
2025.
the end of 25, that's what I could
Two
Because it
years.
would be unfortunate to lose that funding, but at the same time, I mean, to your point, everyone needs to play.
You might be able to get an extension.
Yeah, I would think that that's likely. I don't know for sure, but I would think that that's likely. If we are showing good faith for
So,
progress.
Just out of curiosity, when you're asking for an extension, from my own knowledge, is there any benefit to asking for the extension sooner than later?
yeah, in conjunction with some other action, which maybe I'll recommend now, I can tell you that Poughkeepsie got 4 extensions to use its cops grant to hire cops.
And no cost.
DOJ, no cost, and then because we were obviously concerned we would use that money. But we were having recruitment problems and there were other issues that around police reform, and we were able to go to DOJ and say, we need to get our house in order before we do it, please don't take that grant away from us, because we're focusing on things that are a priority in policing in this country, and they were very, through Senator Schumer's office, we were able to get that done. But, so let me just run a, I know we're going to go over on this subject, but I want to give you something to think about. They're going to have trouble raising money, which we already see that. We know that the 900 is roughly a third, maybe less,
of what we believe has proposed. And we, I think, established, I've heard that there's concerns among the board as to, A, the timing of this, vis-a-vis other priorities, and also perhaps there's some deficiencies organizational-wise that impact utilization. So if this board were to address those issues front on, pass a resolution that would give them some guidance in terms of what you might be willing to do if they met certain deliverables, right? In other words, take an action that says to your constituents and your and the community exactly what you're saying. That it's not that you're opposed to it, it's a great plan for all these reasons, but it's not the right time, and it's not the right time because of these priorities. And you're essentially in that resolution giving them a roadmap of things that you want them to accomplish before they come back and make the ask. The ask is premature, is essentially what we're saying. The only thing I'm adding to the discussion is that how does this board choose to communicate its collective goal and objective, right? You have a couple different ways you could do it. You could ask the town manager to send them a letter, and when we craft that, we run it by you for review, kind of like we did with SBAA, and we get your feedback, and then we send a letter. Or, you know, the board can adopt a resolution saying that, you know, whereas this, whereas that, and resolve this and that. The other thing I would say, and I'm a big fan of the arts, and I would love to see this happen, is that to aid their fundraising, it would be helpful, although somewhat innovative, if the town were to be able to make at least a tacit commitment to helping them financially if they reach certain thresholds in their own fundraising. So I think Diana mentioned the Hartford Foundation, she created Hartford Arts Council. I did some work with them years ago when I was in Hartford, and with other grantors, and you know, everybody loves the match. Everybody loves to be able to say, well, if Curtis, you know, puts in some money, then we'll do that. Municipal government can do that as well. We can say, we want to see more skin in the game. You got 900,000 over here. And now it's on them. It's not us blowing the 900,000 because we couldn't get it together to find the other 3 million or 2.5 million. It is clear that we've given them through a positive action of the board guidance on what you need to see and then bring it back to us. I would encourage you to we'll craft a resolution and we'll have a presentation, we'll do whatever, but it should be a definitive action so that your constituents can look back and say, this issue was brought up and this is how the board did it. Just an idea.
Yeah, I like that idea because I've relayed to the president multiple times, like, you know, you have a bid, you know how much it's really going to cost, you know how much you're really going to get from your donors. I've talked to people on the board that believe that if, let's just say we gave another few $100,000, can we get this much money? And they say yes, but then they say, well, we can't raise it until we have this commitment, and it's this vicious circle. So I kind of like the idea, either a resolution or a letter that says, these are the things we need to see from you, signed it from the board, because we've been talking about it for 2 years, and can you commit to these things, and then we can bring it back in the budget and decide if it's worth pursuing. But
I think it would be very reasonable for a nonprofit organization of their length and involvement to secure gift commitments from donors.
Subjects too.
That's a very common thing, and the donors that they're going to be talking to are very aware of that. So I'm surprised to hear that they're reluctant to make the ask. That's my concern.
and I don't know if they have or haven't made the ask, but they haven't produced the results that this is what we're getting, right?
The difference between a conversation and a commitment
Yeah.
check, right? So that they aren't ready to do that, that's a concern they're going to have to put up. It's just the reality. It's not angry, it's not mad, it's not indifferent, it's just the reality.
So-
They're gonna have to sell it.
So I like what you're saying, so it's not really, let's just take one takeaway, right? It's not really a current goal, it's not a goal, because we don't know what the end result is yet, but it is a takeaway for our board to put something of an ask together to the PAC to give us firm answers on certain things, is what you're saying, right?
I think also maybe a little bit more, I need to giving them some assurance of what level of commitment may come if they, so that they have a clear roadmap. I do know from meeting with them today that I was impressed that they've actually helped to strengthen their board. we've got some pretty strong and credible board members on there now, which I know you know some of them. I think, just based on the people involved, that they probably could raise the money. But it's a question of the cart coming before the horse. You go do that before you ask us to commit $500,000 or whatever.
And just to, I didn't think this would take all this time, but one other thing too is we could do is have them come back and present the actual plan. If we're putting, what come tell us, tell the whole board in a public meeting, that we will commit to these things. And so that could be the takeaway from today.
And I would encourage you to do that. I think it's a great idea, get them in front of you, have them presentation, and then take action, either by letter or resolution, saying, yes, 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 but only if you do
Yep.
these things, and then they've got. Okay, so
Diversion for the next
a useful diversion on PAC, which I think is helpful. We've got some takeaways there. Does anybody mind if we go for another 20 minutes before breaks?
Yeah.
We
keep
can.
going.
Okay. Let's jump right in, because we are running just a little behind on housing. Is that big subject that came up, I think, 5 or 6 times in section 1, and just making it over to section 2. So I'll just kick us off with, we do intend to get through Wendy a draft resolution for your review, forming the new housing committee, and centralizing, if you will, the efforts of town employees, volunteers, and external stakeholders in this process. So it seemed to us, and I think this board is ready to act on that, if we get you the necessary paperwork in time for your next meeting, that committee hopefully would be adopted. So the question for this evening's discussion is, what, and I'll try to frame this as well as I can. What do you believe, as the policy board, should be the goals and objectives of our collective administration for the next few years as we work to alleviate the affordability issue and improve housing options for all of our constituents? Right? So I'm going to be careful to frame this as it's not just an affordable housing issue. I think that's certainly one component. But for me, it's what is the appropriate level of housing vis-a-vis the level of economic development or lack thereof. And I want to open it up for discussion on this. We've got 15 minutes. We can revisit it, but let's get some broad thoughts out there. Wendy, do you want to kick us off on housing? I know it's a tough. Communities all over the country are wrestling with this.
So here, the one thing that I always hear, and we all hear, everybody hates the apartments, right? That's what we hear. There's too many, whatever. And I'm not, I need to, on that front, somebody needs to tell me that the burden will be on all of us if these apartments happen. And I'm not going to the apartments. What I feel.
What do you mean the burden will be on us? Just
That, I was going to use the Guts theory, that the presentation that the company made saying that the apartments taxes will cover all the burden on the town is coming from their hired consultant. The town itself, if we were to just say, we're going to be in the red with 580 apartments on town services, if somebody just came and said that, then to me, it's like, why would we bother doing this, right?
Zoning has, per their last meeting, they did request George to draw up a RFP for independent studies
Okay. I missed
on
that.
that. It was really cloudy on what George's pathway would be. But zoning has requested that pathway be pursued.
Okay, because if it is, I know this is not gonna, we're gonna get $10 million a year proven, and I know we can't prove it, from having these apartments, then that's a question, do we want the apartments, do we want the revenue? And then you get into, if they get rid of the motor vehicle tax, then no one's paying any taxes in the apartments, and, right, there's no taxes made. But where I was going with housing is just the housing need that I see in the community or hear about is how do we bring in, I heard it at the thing, small homes. How do we bring in, like, is it a planned urban development? I think Jackie Ballas gave me that term. Small homes that new buyers can come in and buy that are 1,500 square foot, that seniors can downsize to. Are there incentives in the town that we can use to make that happen? We have town-owned land. I know I keep bringing up the 24 acres at Meadowood. We have 24 acres there that you could probably, you know, you got to. So that's where I see a housing need in town. Smart somewhere to get that kind of downsizing first-time house buyer into the mix in town. That's all I'm going to say for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to look at this as a bigger picture. What are the real needs that we have? Oftentimes, it's escaping me the development, but there was a development built in town, and just thought that this was going to be a great place for where maybe some of our younger residents would live, and new teachers, and that sort of thing, and that's not moved in. Simsbury did, and that was a great thing, but I think we really need to get our head around what the real need is, rather than speculating. So, and try to see, and we do need to look at how many more rental properties do we want in our town? What housing in general, all different levels, what is the real need? And I think it's hard to answer all the needs for housing without at least, I for one, I don't know what the actual real need is. And not any of the categories.
So I can frame it a little bit differently, and that is that we tend to have in the forefront of our minds specific developments that propose something that maybe isn't palatable or for whatever reason doesn't fit, the community doesn't want. Really, the discussion for us is not so much about the particular project, but whether or not the policy board wants to incent through some of the mechanisms that we have at our disposal to incent other development, right? So if you've got developer A that proposes a 2,000 unit thing and we all hate it, okay, well that's maybe out of our purview a little bit, that's going to go through the planning process, and it'll be approved, it'll be denied, or we'll end up in court. But for this board, what we're interested
I see you on
in is,
Facebook all the time.
what would you like to incent, to the extent that you can incent developers to build certain things? And to have, to your point, we don't know what the needs are, what the demand is, that's true. But I can tell you that the development community probably does. Because they have their bean counters and they have their bankers. And, you know, the funders that fund these developments are funding it because they see a need and a demand for that. Or in some cases, the state tax credits are funding it because they want to address the affordable issue, right? So we can't mess with what the state does, and we can't, at list levels, to deny a specific application because we think it's not palatable or doesn't fit. But what we can do is we can provide a counterpoint to the development community to incent other things. And that's why I think housing ties to economic development. Because if you want economic development, you have two ways to get it, in my view. You can incent some mom and pop business to come and open up that shop. Or you could take the bigger view and incent a developer to develop something that's got retail and is a mixed use component, right? So to the extent that we can offer incentives at the town level to incent that type of development, that's something that I think we could talk about here. I don't know what all you know about available properties and things like that, but I know that in other communities, tax abatements and other incentives are put on the table. Typically, they're put there for senior housing or for affordable housing, but they could be put there for economic there could be a mechanism to marry the two that incents the growth on the retail and economic side and the housing stocks.
But then how you also, in my opinion, you also need to marry with those two things. The burden that developing too fast, if you're developing too fast, then we have, it's making our schools strained and our EMS services strained and our roads. So that needs to look, we need to look at that full picture in order to do it correctly. Get it right. I don't know.
Well, and I have a question to that end though, because I think it would be important for us, as well as quite honestly the community, to know what developments that are, and I'm not talking again language, I'm not talking about, but then you are going to talk about specific, because there are some things surrounding housing developments and things that are currently happening that they're happening because they were agreed upon long before we were elected in office. And what can we do about them now, but really it's the plan of what we want it to look like going forward from this point on. But I'd like to know what other properties or what other developments are on the books currently that we need to know that we either need to mitigate or do work around so that we can then also inform a plan for us going forward, for the town going forward. Because we can set a plan, but if things are already in motion that we're not aware of, and we put parameters within our plan that are either in addition to those or against those, but we have no say in them, like I think that's important for us to know.
Okay, so first, the only thing that's missing that's pre-approved is Barber Cove. That's the one down by the Performing Arts Center.
Right, okay.
That's 4 fairly large buildings. That's approved. Chris Nelson may be moving forward on that this summer. Other than that, I'm sorry, I'm just in zoning, so I have some insight there. Other than that, there's nothing pre-approved.
Okay.
To touch on the south parcel, because I think that's what you were inferring at one point, part of having a break part on what they call the study, part of the plan was the north parcel was supposed to be residential. That was our plan.
Mm-hmm.
The south parcel was supposed to be entirely commercial. And they have deviated to, they made it entirely residential. Now they're like, yeah, we threw in a building on the side. We're okay, right? And the truth of the matter is, our zoning department at times, I've spoken that I feel we might be a little weak in that area because they're disregarding the plan. And they're like, we can do it. Now, just a little shift in the tact to engage with what Wendy said about, and what Mark said about incentivizing. When you're building anything, if you can do it denser, your cost per unit is greatly reduced, not even a little reduced. To incentivize single-family dwelling units, you would have to offset that gain. That doesn't mean we have to put anything anywhere. We do have, yes, you can come in with the 830G and slam it down our throats, but we still do have zoning laws. And in truth, when you come in and slam that 830G down the town's throat, you're not going to make as much money usually because you've got a 30% affordable housing limit. It's not even 20%, it's 30%. That's taking a large chunk of their profits. So if they're ever going to try that, there already is a stopgap that most people don't acknowledge in that ruling. The other thing, as far as density, if you're building apartment buildings, which I'm not just flat out against them, but I do feel we are growing at an exponential rate. When you build an apartment building, boom, you've got 80 units, or whatever number, I just made that up. When you're doing single-family dwelling units, your crews typically, they don't leapfrog, but they like follow each other through a development. It takes a lot longer for that development to come to fruition. It's just a totally different method. And I personally, only speaking about me, do like that pathway because could we stuff as many people? I love Simsbury. Of course people want to live here. It's not like, why would you want to live here? I get that. We just need to, just have traffic flow, if you will, of the housing. It's not that we should deny anyone accessibility to our community. We do need to give developers room to make money, to give workforce housing, which will, enable economic development. But I do feel what Mark alluded to is a pathway that we need to pursue, which is how do we encourage them not to do these huge complexes, because it will preserve our town character and allow us to grow at a reasonable rate. So, sorry, that was me.
How do we address the multi-use issue right now that it continuously gets brought up from different developers who will come back and say, we can't fill the commercial part of it, we're only filling the residential part, and then those are staying vacant.
Can I answer that one?
I'm gonna let Steve.
So let me just get up to the podium.
Put this
So, as everyone knows, I am also in development. Not necessarily development, but property ownership. And as such, many of my peers that I have dialogues with are the other large property owners in town. None of us have a problem with renting our commercial units. Most of us are in excess of 95% rental. I hate to call BS, but I'm going to call BS. All of us are at 95% rental. And they're like, well, we can't rent any. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter, I'm not going to use the word I was going to misenunciate. But it just doesn't make sense that only they can't rent spaces.
Right.
I know that many of these larger players, if you will, would rather wait for their rate. So there was an establishment in town, I won't say at one time I wanted to rent, and there were 10,000 a month triple net. I said, well, I can't make the numbers work. Nobody's ever going to do that. So I had to walk away because they were not willing to negotiate. They'd rather leave it vacant than lower their expectation. They had so many holdings, they didn't really care, which is these larger people we're talking about. They have so many holdings, they really don't care that much. Leave it blank. And eventually they did get an establishment that came in and paid them that top dollar, and it has worked. So it did work for them. Now, a smaller guy like me looks at it like, well, if I'm vacant for a month, I lost 10 grand. I'd rather take 8 grand for 12 months than 10 grand for 4. It's a different perspective. The people that are not renting, coincidentally, are these larger investment people that can take that loss and put it into their percentages, and it's a palatable vacancy percentage. So
Steve, I have a question for you on that. Like, so I understand what you're saying, but we have a bunch of vacant buildings in town. I don't think it looks good, like Vincent's and the old building over there.
So Vince,
So what, just so if these large companies come in, if we make them put in commercial, and they're like, whatever, we'll just leave it empty. That doesn't necessarily help us if we're forcing them to do that, because we're going to leave the building empty. Right, so we have to somewhat marry the two, I think, just so that,
okay.
you know, because the larger players are the ones that are going to do these big projects, and smaller players don't have to, it's a lot of capital, capital's expensive right now, so, you know, might as well.
Sometimes it's the current property owner who didn't want to negotiate or sell to somebody else. So that's why Andy sat vacant for so long, for example. You know, so that's why the north end where Wagner is has sat vacant for so long. It was because they're the property owner and the landlord didn't want to do anything with it. So
That's not necessarily true,
well,
just to clarify.
yeah.
Well, not like detail, just say like just a general topic.
Let me
my
just
point is-
answer the
yeah.
question, because we're starting to go way off into a further
Right.
field. The first thing is you asked, how do we implement it in a fashion that these commercial units that are multi-use are rented? And the way we have done it in the past, and I would presume is the way you would continue to do it, is you tie your percentage of units that are allowed to get a CO to that commercial development. If they don't build it and or populate it, then they can't get more COs. If they can't get more COs, now you're costing them.
So is that a zoning ordinance?
Yeah.
Is that how it is?
It doesn't necessarily have to be an ordinance, it can be a zoning condition.
Okay.
So each property can be negotiate. Did that answer? Wasn't there another thing you asked?
Yeah, no, I think.
Oh, I wanted to point out that Vincent's, you had asked about them just for clarification. It's mom and pop. They're renovating it themselves. That's why it's been vacant for so long. To answer the Wagner thing, because that's the audience owner questions. Rick Wagner held on to it. It became really sticky. He actually owned the lot between what we call the dealership and Big Y, and he owned the upper parcels behind it. And he was negotiating between me, to be frank, and Elliot Gersten. He eventually sold it to Elliot. Elliot has only owned it for about a year now. As soon as Elliot owned it, he did submit his proposal for Chipotle/Starbucks. So time has been moving.
Yes.
Chipotle Starbucks, from what I understand, had the opportunity. They would not sign the lease until Simsbury said, okay, you can do it. In the interim, West Hartford did have a pad that it fit in with, and they pursued that, so they are holding, and hopefully they will come, because, to be honest, that building is dilapidated, which is another thing I won't get into, but our zoning enforcement, we're not supposed to allow these dilapidated buildings. We have ordinances, they are not enforced, and it's really too bad, because it does make our town look like crap, and it's not allowed, and we already have the ordinances, they're just not enforced.
Well, and it's a shame that the south end of town, which could use and have people have been asking for some commercial development, stores and shops, economic commercial development down there, and now it's kind of being strong held like by this.
I'm not following you.
So this, like the south part of the Hartford, you said it's supposed to be commercial, and they're changing it.
Well, that was the plan, the master plan, the form-based plan, I can't remember the name.
But there are people that live in the south end of town that want retail there. They want commercial businesses there.
They didn't want Target.
Well, they don't want Target.
They didn't want Target,
Right.
but, you know, I think that developers are doing this all over the country. It's not unique to Simsbury. You know, we're gonna come in, we're gonna put in retail or commercial, and then 2 years later, the plan changes. The only thing that works is residential. And, you know, it's all about their ROI. And they're not wrong. There isn't the demand for commercial that there is for residential. But there's not the profit to be made. And frankly, there aren't the state tax credits, and you know, there aren't folks incenting economic development like they are attempting to incent affordability in residential housing, right? To Wendy's point earlier, you know, we may prefer a development of single-family homes, but it's just not economically feasible, given the cost of construction and the timeline for the model that Stephen cited, where they, you know, do one house at a time over the course of, you know, 2.5 years. So, again, with all of that background, is there is there any consensus amongst you about what the priority should be vis-a-vis housing? Is there a clear consensus that we want to explore has everybody seen the report that was?
Yeah.
It was circulated, okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, that is, and I don't know what to call it, but we'll call it Franklin's housing. It was a very comprehensive study of what other communities have done and are doing. And there are, you know, maybe 10 or 15 things in there that are seriously things that could be considered by this board if you want to do that. So we could make that a separate discussion, take a look at that. We could, you know, in the town manager's office, work with you to synthesize the 5 or 6 things that you think might be worth doing, some of which I think are within your legislative purview, a couple of which are not, clearly need state enabling legislation. But, you know, that work that was done before I got here was a really good piece of work that could guide your sense of where you want to go. And so, I don't know, Wendy, what do you think?
My thought is, that's why I want to start the advisory committee, so let them figure it out, take all this. I mean, I don't know if we can sit here and go, unless we're the advisory committee on housing, to go through every idea in that document, figure out where we want to go, or if those are things we want to do. If that's how this should work, then we don't need an advisory committee.
Well, you
That's
gotta-
what I'm hearing, is like,
I would just say, Wendy,
we
not
are needed.
to interrupt you, but
when we form the housing committee, this board is giving it its mission. Because we're in the process of
So then we
crafting its
need,
mission.
so if we're gonna give it its mission, then we need to all sit down, go through those ideas and say, these are things that we want to explore, which is a, pre-work before that even happens, right?
Okay.
That's what is that what you guys are thinking? Because I don't know about everyone here, but I'm not equipped to go through all those ideas tonight on housing. I just putting that out there.
Well, none of these we're gonna solve tonight
Yeah.
anyway.
So it's a
We're gonna
circle
try to
back.
set whether or not it's a priority, and if it's a priority to establish a committee or a commission or an advisory group or whatever it is, that's gonna talk about these issues. And
That's
now
right.
I'm imagining what this is, since TOC already determined what the vision was, that this is a coordinating group that discovers the things like we hear about from Board of Ed that doesn't know that a development is happening. And DEI says that there's an issue with inclusivity and people feeling like they're welcome in the community, et cetera, et cetera. And businesses, aren't all the other things associated with it. So I understand that, if that's what the discussion on the housing advisory group. But maybe I spent too much time at your restaurant, Stephen, but when I stand in front of the urinal in the men's room, there's the Powell Landing newspaper there, and a small little article that says that, housing costs are skyrocketing, and it's, unaffordable here. So that was the news story on the, below the fold on the front page of the 1969 Hartford Current. And it's still an issue that we're addressing today. And so thinking that we're going to solve it with this, I don't think. But being able to perform an intergovernmental coordinating function and, getting the full impetus of the whatever power this board can give to it, great, I'm behind it.
So what I'm hearing is, Mark, you're saying, there's things in that list that are within our purview, right? Is that's a piece that would feed into this group that we need to do some work on ourselves, is what you seem to be saying.
I would be reluctant to give the newly formed committee that entire
Document,
work and
yeah.
say, have at it, because parts of it require a subject matter expertise. So what I think, and I could be a resource, certainly I'm diving into it, narrow that and incorporate it into the mission that we're drafting for your approval as you form the committee. That would be a
Mark will chair the housing advisory.
So that's like, could be a board discussion and a lower level discussion on this at some point, or if we have an off next stage here. But if I can, and we probably should take a break, I think it would be worthy to talk about really economic development. I think we all agree that we need some sort of economic development vision and plan, right? And maybe that's where we go next and talk about some concepts and ideas that we can put into that to go forward. Because it just sounds like that sounds like something we have to do. So otherwise we're not going to have grandless growth. We're not going to be affordable. We got to get something going there. So that's just what I was thinking.
key issue. Let's take our last break. We'll circle back to that and two other things I have, and then we'll call it.
There is one other apartment building, Dorset Crossing.
Yeah.
Already has a
Yeah,
pre-approved building that has not been
How
built.
many years is it?
It's not small. It's not huge, but it's not small.
Okay.
It might be, I don't.
Quick break, everybody. Kevin, go ahead.
I was just going to say, on the economic development thing, I don't want to stifle conversation, but I'll say, I think that we're actually all in agreement on it being a priority, and I think the work of putting these on the priorities, defining it and all the other things. So if I don't want to take the wind out of the sail, but my thought is if there's other things that maybe are a little bit more contentious, we move on and discuss those, and since we all sort of agree it's a priority.
Sure.
Is everybody in agreement on that?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of actually, I think want to, but.
Okay.
So
So
what do you
we've
put
got
up there?
economic development up there, number one. We're going to move on. We've spent some time on housing, but I think what I heard, if I can read my writing, is with the formation of the committee, we're going to charge them with going through that report and figuring out the 5 or 6 things that the committee would recommend to this board to adopt or take action. Is Is that right? Are we good there?
I thought, I heard it backwards, right? I'm happy to have that backwards, but that's not what I heard.
I don't think that's what I heard either.
Okay, so-
I thought,
So, Alvin?
I thought you said, I'm taking your lead, that we would look at those items and we would pick things in our purview that we would task this housing group with. But that's not to say if we can't move forward on the housing thing, in that being a piece that we get to feed into that. I mean, it's probably gonna take a long time to, so I don't know which comes first, but, right? We would come up with items in that.
The community needs to charge.
Yeah,
This
so we
group
need
needs
to
establish
charge the
that charge.
committee.
So, would this board like to go through it and pick out 5 or 6 things, or would you like to entrust me to do that? Or would you like me to do it and bring it back to you for you to look at?
How about that?
That's what you're paid
Ah,
for.
right. Okay, I'm happy to do that.
Form of
And
government.
I actually already kind of have, so that's good. Something that we will quickly do.
So I'll pick one topic that we should go to.
Pick one as long as we can get back to DEI, because I promised you.
Oh, yeah, we should. Well, so let's, I'd like to just, and maybe like just Kevin said, we all know that transparency, technology, I love transparency kind of and technology together.
Yeah,
And you could even throw efficiency under here, which I think Heather did.
Yep.
But,
we're gonna merge those 3, which I think we also heard, right? So let's carry them over to the final list. So, technology, transparency, and efficiency, I think broadly describes a number of things that we can do internally that frankly either save us money or certainly don't cost us more. All right.
the top item, I'm just gonna say this because I said it for 3 years and Heather's heard it.
That is true.
And it actually made Lee's list is, and then I think it's in the budget this year, is moving to ClearGov budget book so that we have, an online budget book that shows the public what our budget looks like. And then as each year goes on, you can drill down and see prior years, compare prior years and things like that. It ties into making information accessible to people. And again, that's going to be a budget question, but I think it is. I think Lee recommended it in his list to bring it on now. And originally we were waiting for pieces of munis to be completed before we could move to that. But I think our finance director, budget director are all thinking we're moving to this next. So that's just one thing that I don't know. I'm sorry. I said I wasn't going to talk much, so I should just
You gotta talk more. So,
Somebody sniffed the water bottle.
ClearGov also have a performance
Yeah.
tool as well.
so might as well tell you, so we had a number of budget meetings, and Tom and I met with
Rob.
all of them.
Oh, sorry.
With all the department heads that are affected, and we are going to recommend ClearGov be funded. It's going to be a 2-phase rollout. One is the first year will be, this year coming will be the capital plan budget. So all the CRR capital budget will be converted to ClearGov. And then in year 2, we'll move operating over there. And that was the recommendation of the budget director that, frankly, I would have maybe pushed it to do both, but because of other time constraints and workloads, staff felt that that 2-year phase in of ClearGov would be the best thing to do. So that's, do I have that right, Tom?
Yeah, so if approved, your capital budget for next year
Would be
would be in there. And then if approved, your
So it's
operating
still
budget 2 years.
3 years, there's still a couple of years out to actually have the digital budget book online.
Well, people can get budget information. It's just in this searchable.
Yeah, we
Have
posted.
you ever seen?
We posted a PDF budget book online every year.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's there.
Is it a searchable PDF?
I believe so.
Okay.
Are all PDFs searchable?
But it's always the best, I mean.
It depends on the standard.
It's not the best.
Yeah, it's not the best, but it bookmark it, so it's the best you can, but the budget's not really.
And it's just Board of Selectmen budget that we're talking about here, right? Or is the
Full
Board of
budget.
Ed going to be coming along with that?
All the time.
Everything would be in there. It's really
So
visual.
it's a single contract with ClearGov?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Initial fees and annual licensing, but the cost isn't bad.
Just one thing that I saw Lee mention this too, which is new, is I asked about the strategic plan piece, which I was thinking, oh, it'd be great to use it for this. And I reached out to Rob Pataki, he's a big sales guy, but it was like $8,500 a year, and really kind of pricey for strategic plan. Really get the other stuff. I just thought I'd mention that.
So on the technology transparency, we'll carry that over to one of your final goals. As a subtext to that, you can expect to see in our upcoming budget funding for Clearway. And hopefully we get your buy-in and approval on that. We'll have some more information about its timeline and rollout as we get the budget ready.
Have you had meetings as far as them doing now?
They gave one in the Board of Selectmen meeting.
2 years ago.
2 years
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah.
So would the rest of us be able to see the?
Yeah, let me, I'll go find what meeting it was and I'll email you.
Okay. Will they be recorded or?
I have links to, from yeah, it's really good, yeah. Oh, actually, just go to the town of, go to the town of East Hartford. They use it, so if you go to their budget, you can actually see the budget.
I know this is like kids demo.
Just go to the town of East Hartford, there's some other towns. The other thing, yeah, South Windsor, and the other thing that came up in the last 2 years since we started looking at this is it's on the CROG list of preferred vendors. So they think they like it. Anyway, so what else do we want under, like, right, are we looking for more items that we want to highlight under?
Well, I do think we should, and it sort of falls under public safety, is address the elephant in the room between the SDAA and the police department move in the building and intergenerational community center potentially being part of that. Those are all, they're part of big capital improvements, but I think under public safety, we need to figure out how we're moving forward, if at all, with SBAA, and if we want to put on a one-year plan, we want to look at the police department and that move, and if it's something we want to look at, and make that decision. At least don't just keep it out there, decide whether we're moving forward with it, and then create which years, or decide whether we don't support moving forward with it,
Isn't that a budget thing now? Or you're just looking for a plan?
Plan. Decide if we want to put it on the budget, like, is it going to
I
be?
think the budget, should address the actual costs, timeline, and all that kind of stuff. But I think what we're lacking, maybe, and if I don't want to jump on what you were saying, but it's really address what the, actual vision will be in addressing a comprehensive public safety strategy for the town, involving, the ambulance and emergency response, the needs of the police department, the changing needs of the police department. That's kind of what I'm hearing.
Right, and
That's
understanding
maybe
what,
the priority.
yeah, and understanding when we're talking about SBAA, now I know that just before we came, there was a response sent, and I haven't read the responses that came, that were sent out. But, I think one of the things that we talked about was, what do we want our ambulance service to look like? And what do we want our first responders and our public safety to look like here in town? Because that will determine how SBAA moves forward, either as part of the town or not. It's staying a private entity, and I think having that plan and what we want our public safety to kind of look like.
It's kind of hard though,
Yeah.
because we got their proposal where they're break even in 4 years?
Yeah.
And everyone has different beliefs of when they will be. So it's going to be hard to set our pathway with such negligible numbers. So I appreciate where you're going, because I'm a big POCD guy
Right.
throughout. You have your plan of development, so just POD. But, to have a plan of development so you can implement things, sort of like we talked about the Performing Arts Center.
Right.
But I think with the SBAA, which I support is bringing it into the budget this year, I just don't know we can really answer even 24 months from now what their needs will be, because it seems like such a wild card going on there as far as the shared, regional assistance, I forget the terminology.
Mutual aid.
Yes, thank you. So it's not that I disagree, because I think it's great to have pathways to your future. I just don't know if that is a quantifiable pathway with any firm belief. You know what I mean? It just seems like, and it's the whole country's plagued with this same scenario. Something's got to give, but who knows what it's going to be and how we're going to,
Right,
what our role is.
I'd like to keep it though as a discussion, because as things develop and as things play out with it, you know, I don't know if it's responsible of us to say, okay, well, we'll fund it this year because we don't know, and then we'll fund it next year because we don't know where they're gonna be. And that's, you know, we're gonna just constantly push the goal line and constantly fund something without knowing where the end goal is. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense.
Potentially.
But let me just get a couple of points of clarity. So the intergenerational center, you mentioned in combination with the PD move, which I've heard a couple of times, seems to me a kind of innovative and almost brilliant concept. Can you tell me more about it briefly?
Well, it's just an idea, because they started as a senior center and has now turned into a multi-generational community center potentially.
Which is taken off the capital.
Which is taken off the capital plan. That has been moved on. I mean, that's been something that's been in discussion for almost 30 years now, and it has gotten nowhere. And I've seen 3 different architectural designs that have been drawn up, that we spent money on, you know, whether it was at Stratbrook or whether it was at the Performing Arts Center. There's been talk at the Apple Barn, and so if the point being is, if we're going to put money into building, moving police and building out stuff, if at the same time part of that can be used for something like this and kill 2 birds with 1 stone, because to build it on its own would cost a lot more money than piggybacking off of another.
Yeah.
I was going to just add, that's come up a few times, a merger of police and community. I think other towns might have a combined or something like that. And so I don't know where to go with that police thing, because we don't have a cost on it. Do we have a cost on it? Whatever, $20 million, right, in year 7 or something. I don't know what that is. The community center got taken off one year because our CIP had everything in the kitchen sink in it, and people just went off to the side and took things out. So we try to keep those items afloat so we don't forget about them. I don't know where that list is anymore. But I don't, from that perspective, I don't personally have a decision today on whether we're going to do that and when, because it's not this year. But I do want to get back to public safety in the respect that the SBAA, we have to take a step this year. We already said we're going to have to take a step this year, and we don't know what the steps are currently next year and the year after. We're not going to know those tomorrow. We may know those next year. So I do think a current action item is, a short-term action item is under public safety SBAA, just period. And I think a longer-term action item is the police, because that goes along with town hall, there's still needs in town hall, right? I keep saying, where's the lights in the parking lot? I'm tired of walking out there with my phone. Oh, really?
Yeah, I think we're doing.
Okay, stuff like that.
So do we have, I think we have time, if we have a minute or 2 to spend on SBAA. So earlier today I sent around their responses. I haven't had a chance to read it yet, so. I just sent it at 1 o'clock, so.
2:49.
2:49.
My thought is, and I agree with you on it being a priority now. So the goal setting is for the biennium. And this is probably one of those items that needs to be accomplished quickly. And then the whole public safety project. Because while we might solve it now for this year's budget and keep it afloat, I don't think that what we're going to solve now is actually going to be the long-term solution that we actually need. So I'm just sort of reiterating, I don't want to distract and say, okay, checking the box on the SBAA if we solve the immediate need, because it's going to still be a long-term solution.
Agreed.
As well. Okay.
the PD group that was discussed when Lee was here, it was built into the 12-year plan that he had extended, is
And I
that?
think it was in year 13, so kind of, we want to keep it on the horizon, but it wasn't into the 12 years. I think it was year 13.
And is the intergenerational senior center on the road?
It was on year 6 at one point, and it's probably.
It was
Yeah,
so
there's been a few things that have been like year 6, but then they just stay in year 6. Like town hall has been year 6 since I've been here.
Yeah.
Every year.
I will just say my first year on the board, when I was on the board, the senior center was out in one of the 6 years. And a subset of people in our board and went off to a room with the town manager and the board of ed when they just took items off and came back and they were gone. And one of them was the community center. And it has been kept on a list each budget year as things that are not on there. So I don't think it's on Lee's.
I think it's also like year 13.
Okay.
It's in the out 13 to 13.
Yeah.
So generally, if something's, 10 years plus out, it's not on, it's on a list, but it's not really on anybody's radar. So if we're interested, if this board is interested in setting that direction, that the potential build out of PD or relocation to free up space in town hall and the building of the community center are potentially linked, I would suggest that we, just move it closer in the capital plan and say within 5 years, this is something that this board wants to achieve. Now, it's not a short-term objective. It becomes a longer-term objective. But giving the community and frankly me some guidance now is helpful because, as Wendy says, these discussions go on and on, nothing ever happened. You're the board that says to your town manager, we don't have enough information to move on this now, but 12 years is not satisfactory. And we want you to look at these things potentially together, a la shared services, efficiencies, cost savings, and put it on the plan for 5 years out and report back in 8 months or something.
I think what we're hearing is that the senior center is in a lovely building, but probably the least accessible building for, an aging population with mobility concerns.
And I'm hearing our staff is really good too, in terms of the service that's provided.
Absolutely, so
Yes.
like the physical plant is the issue.
Correct.
And the same thing with the police
And
department.
parking.
And so if we're looking at what renovation or whatever else, or new space, or build is new, or whatever it is that we're gonna address, it makes sense, and this is, I think, where you were coming from on this, is, to think about doing them together and in concert, and getting as much density and development.
I heard that for the first time really the other day and now here today, and it's sort of framing. I love those types of things because, as I said, there's a good example of taking two problems, putting them together and seeing if you can come up with one solution. It's not something that we're going to accomplish in 2 years.
No.
But if you want it to potentially be accomplished in 5, you need to include it on your longer-term objectives now. Move or build out PD and get a senior center, get a solution to your senior center, and that's an objective of the board that the community can get behind if you do that now. If we don't address it, it'll come up every year for discussion, but nobody's going to take the bull by the horns and say, go do a study, find out how much it's going to cost, and look at alternatives.
If we could do it together, if we could combine it, I think that's the only win for everybody. Because it's not 20 million for this and 20 million for, they actually said 9 million for the community center. That's
Mary knows too, I
years
think.
ago.
I like it.
So, and then I think that would be a good, vision out in the middle of the CIP somewhere. Again, we still have I've heard rumors that the $100 million
Yeah, it's
squadron
100 now.
is going away or may not be really needed. I don't know, I've heard that rumor. So, that's like the big, whatever, whale out there. But if that really did go away, that does allow us, and then if you go out a few years, right, because we do have like high debt service the next couple of years. But after whatever, there may be room out in the middle there for another big capital project, if there's no big Board of Ed project, because they always kind of kibosh our projects. Even though, I'm not saying that we're not the Board of Ed, but it kiboshes the town infrastructure projects.
But I think we can look at more of those type of efficient type capital improvement projects. Like if they're both needed and we can combine them, and it's a cost, you know, it doesn't cost nearly as much to do one versus two.
Actually, can we merge public safety and the senior center on there and get approved to 5-year capital plan? And we'll include it on the longer term objectives.
Steve just saved us $30 million.
And killed both of them at the same time.
Okay, folks, we got 7 o'clock. Wendy, I want to give you space too. You've got a couple of other items that you know that you might want us to include.
Well, I just, well, I don't want to take the one thing, I was gonna just go back to under the transparency, if anybody had any ads, but you know, the whole website cleanup, the ability to search that website and get rid of, you know, not bring up things from 2012 before you see anything from 2023. I know that we restarted people looking at cleaning up the website. I don't know if it's just a cleanup, do we need a new platform? You know, I don't know, but I still think something has to happen in that space for people to be able to find information in a historical order that makes sense. And like I said, I would want other people to weigh in. We all just I say that and then I keep talking. The grants, right? We all talk about the grants. We all want a way to bring in more money and get more money. And CROG has a shitload of money out there. We never got any infrastructure money from the
BIL.
Yeah, BIL, IIJA, whatever it's called. And there's Safe Streets for All money in there, which I keep hearing, you know, we need crosswalks here or sidewalks or things like that. Like we could, if we had a safety plan, we could get that funded through them. The bridges and dams that are out there, we're trying to get money for that. I said I have some things on here that are like things that people have raised that I don't know if we want to address here. So I don't want to waste time. I'm going to throw this one out there. So our state rep has proposed this initiative, and it's moving Route 315. I just kind of put this out there because you know, it was brought to the town by our state rep because she had heard from constituents in Terriffill. It's not something that I've ever heard about. I had asked Heather as a Terriffill mom if she had heard about it, but apparently it was something that was heard, and that it is somewhere, in something from the past, because Nick said it's somewhere. So they're talking about moving 315 to where the dump is. Wolcott Road, and then East Granby is involved, and so the state is starting to look at that, and I don't know how much town resources that project will take, but I do have questions in that. If it moves, we inherit the bridge outside of the Geminis. It's still Geminis to me. You know, is that the old well? I remember the in place. Let me just tell you. We inherit that, so you know, 10 years down the line, that could be a huge cost to the town if something screws up there. And I'm just putting it out to all 6 of you because I shouldn't be the only one that knows about it. Is that something that Mark, would that be part of our purview? Because at one point, if we put up a no through truck sign or the police had to watch that street, you know, somebody's got to tell them to do that. Or is it not our purview and it's the state decides if they want to move the road? But I
designate that as 315A for the length of it. It goes right up to the Terriffill and make 315 on Wolcott Road.
Is it Wolcott or Floyd?
So it's Wolcott, which touches Floydville.
Yeah.
So this is part of the Route 10 corridor study, has been touched on twice in the past 10 years. It's entirely under the state's purview. We have no control over this. It's outside of our purview. We literally, they're state routes. The state dictates where they go.
But if somebody is taking the initiative to try to move it, right? Because it could just stay there. I mean, if somebody's taking the initiative to try to move it, and we're involving Nick and Tom Roy, and we end up inheriting stuff, is that, do we just let that happen? Do we want that to happen? That's what I'm asking you, is that, I don't know. I mean, is that a needed thing that we need? How much town resources are on that? I'm just.
Do we have a say? Or no?
Yeah, I don't know. Why don't we have a say?
I think the answer is that you can't say no, but you could request. The question I think what he's asking is does this board embrace that potential move of 315 or not? So that if we have an opportunity to shoot it, at the state, we can. Or do we just have to
Well,
yes to whatever?
here's a devil's argument to it, to proposing moving it is getting 315 out of residential. And if you want to propose more economic and business development down on Wolcott, if possible, that brings that traffic that way, so.
But does it filter trucks through the part of town we're trying to develop also? Like, okay.
So this first came up in the 1991 POCD. Basically, what this does is the fork where County and Hoskins is, they first introduced in that POCD to have a connecting road go through the farmland that is now the solar farm and come down and make a four-way intersection with Wolcott Road and Hot Meadow Street. When we accepted the solar farm, part of our contingency was at the end of 20 years, they must remove all of their equipment and they must sell that land to the town for $1. In theory, at that point, we will recircle. As I'm sure you all noticed, they try and do away with forks wherever they can. They would make that a four-way T-bone intersection at Holcomb and at Hoskins and County. And the backside of that loop goes by that land on the backside that's now for sale from Griffin Land. It also borders where the skating center is, so it's all commercial. It's also all commercial down Wolcott Street. Yes, there are a couple leftover residential, but even those, I believe, are zoned either commercial or industrial. So that is also the riding force of making that 315 is now the quote-unquote truck route would be along commercial lane. This doesn't come to fruition for 15 years. I think we need to put it where it is on that back burner for 15 years, but understand that they're working towards that. But Wendy's 100% right. If we inherit that bridge, it's like inheriting your grandpa's car. Won't bad analogy, but some jalopy. You know what I mean? We really don't want it, but I think the fighting argument is state route should be on commercial property. And that really is part of that longer range plan, which is why I bring it up.
So, I mean, like I said, I need to defer just since we're talking, it's something that's not really my decision and it's town resources. And so I think what I'm hearing is that it's not, if it comes to needing town resources or our input, right now it doesn't sound like it's a priority of ours unless somebody makes it a, yeah. So anyway, I know about it.
So we're crossing that off the list.
It's not on my list, I just wanted
It's
to
not
get
on my
it.
list.
Oh, okay,
Get up Wednesday, move 315, we're done. How quickly can we do that?
So the other, again, we talked about the DEI thing. I was gonna broach that one. Obviously the intentions and the meaning of DEI is important. And I've been reading how across the country people are ditching DEI. This is like the last couple of weeks. There's a lot of articles on that, or they're not funding DEI stuff. And but the big question is right now, this DEI council got $22,000 for a data study that they have no idea what they're going to study. They're just like, in my opinion, I would, no offense anyway, but it's a little bit, they're looking for guidance. They took it, they were going to do it, it's after 3 years, now they're coming back. I sent that email, I think, to everybody, and it's like, they need resource help, they might need funding, they don't know what to study, they want to know what we want to do in this DEI space. So it kind of kicked it back to us. And I don't know what that means, to be honest with you. I don't know how to define a DEI vision. We can say we don't welcome Black and ethnic people to the community, or we don't treat those people well, or people that are Jewish don't have a place to go buy kosher food. I don't know. But what the hell does it mean to us, and what would we do to make it meaningful? I don't know. I just don't know. So if that is something we want to do, then what do we think it means?
Well, a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
this board with different members
Yeah.
that you signed, declaring, racism a public health crisis.
Yeah.
So if it is still a priority for the community to address these issues, and at least name them, then this council is, I think, trying to be that point of conversation, on addressing those issues. And they are, as I mentioned with the housing advisory, they don't have, statutory or ordinance writing authority, but they have some convening authority and support from the community. And I think in order for them to be able to do their work and do it with support of the people of the town that they serve, they need the benefit of this board defining what their scope and responsibility will be. And so that's where I think that might be on here. And I think that your difficulty in defining it, Wendy, I would easily share as well. And I think that's why they're coming to us to be able to have that tough conversation and be able to define it. Because I think there's probably a really good way to do this, and there's probably some really bad ways to do it. And so I don't have the answer for it, but I think that's probably why it ended up on the priority list previously. And since we're having so much difficulty with it now, it might be one reason why we want to keep it in some form of priority for this board.
Well, so Curtis, you said you went to a meeting on Friday.
Yeah, Kevin, we
Okay.
Both attended. He's the
Kevin's
data
the
expert.
liaison.
He's the data expert.
No, no.
That's the issue. So Curtis.
Because okay, good, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, so it's good to get the history. So the DI came out of the blackface incident.
Correct.
So with that, it's hard to say like what is the so it's getting knowledge and so my understanding with that situation was that people didn't know that's something you couldn't do. So like if you that's not defense, but maybe we need to do a better job of teaching people so I think to me that's what DI more is about, teaching people, when you leave Simsbury, you gotta interact with the world. And so you gotta be prepared to deal with that world. So what are we doing to prepare people to deal with that in the town that's like 99% white? So we should spend some time and some money. I don't think it's that much money we're spending. When they're going through the budget, they do Juneteenth and everything, and all those costs are going up. And so if we truly believe in this town that that's something we want to prepare our kids for and make people feel welcome with, I don't know that we should say that it has to be so. It's a hard thing to measure because it touches so many different things. So it's hard to define it specifically because I was drilling them. Like I need something to be able to go back and tell people to say, this is what DI does. This is what we're spending money for. And it's hard to quantify it, but I still think it's important, something we should support. Not just,
So I was one of the charter members of the DEI Council. I'm one of the people that helped start the council to begin with, when it was Spirit Council, before it became DEI. And because I believed in what the purpose was, and I also represented the disability community in the inclusion piece of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think there's an education piece that they're working on and they're constantly bringing to the awareness. But I think if you look at almost every single one of our goals with a DEI lens, I think that's where we could potentially give them a target, even for their data, like what do they want to use this data money for? Well, we could say, we want you to get data on economic development in Simsbury and how DEI is affected or can affect economic development in our town. And so maybe take one of our goals through a DEI lens, and that is what we set for them, to utilize that, to get data back to us, and make it usable not only for them to accomplish some of their goals, but to help accomplish some of our goals. Maybe that is helpful to understand DEI in housing, or economic development specifically, or public safety even. But I think that's where we could go back to them and say, we would like you to get data on, economic development in Simsbury. How can it increase And how does DEI help economic development, and how does economic development help DEI in town of Simsbury? I think that is within our purview to go back to them and say, you know, this, you want guidance on how to utilize funds, you know, utilize it through one of our board goals, which is a suggestion.
When they originally applied for it, did they get something? No, right? No, they just applied for it.
So my memory's not great, because we did declare racism a public health crisis. That was what was being done at that time, right? Honestly, I haven't read it recently, and I don't really know what we said. Well, I know what we said in there, but what does that commit to, that we are declaring it? You know, there were a lot of resolutions that are done, right? So if we go back and we look at that, I mean, that might be, what does that say? What are we committing to there?
So is the understanding the data study, whichever they decide to do, they need more funding?
So according, so they came to us, they had the $22,000, they got I have to say, the consultant was the least expensive consultant. They came to a meeting, I went to the meeting and I said, where's the project plan, what's the goal, what are you trying to look at with this data? You know, we're just gonna randomly pull data without any kind of zeroing in. And as you know, you gotta really pull data once you get data to see if you wanna drill down in certain places. And they didn't really have an answer. And then they said they would get the answer, then they pushed back that email to us saying, we need all this stuff from you guys. So it's like a reversal. That's how I felt. And so I haven't delved into that. And I don't know if Kevin, if you and Curtis have, but I just don't know what the right answer is. Is it, if it's going to include more town resources, more funding, what's the outcome? What are we going to get from it if we go down that road? I don't know. Is it worth the road to go down? I guess is the real question I'm asking. I don't know.
So, as a liaison, I'm
Yes, you are.
happy to work with them. And I think there's another good news story is that Mark has taken on some responsibility in the town manager's office to be a liaison for staff for them as well. And so I have a realistic expectation that might mean that they're able to get some additional support to answer some of these questions.
Okay.
One of the reasons why I think they're asking this question and we got that request from them is that they do have this funding on the line and available, and it would be a darn shame to waste it and not ask the right questions that serves the interests of the community. So I think as volunteers, they're trying to do the right thing with what they've been charged to do and having a passionate interest in doing some good things. And Curtis heard some missteps along the way when they asked for some things from other people and an entertainer and all that, right? So they're trying to do the right parts either. And I don't have the right answer. This is not my professional area. But I do think that I can help them with framing, a survey instrument or what questions we would want from the board. I think that Mark can probably share and articulate better than I could there. And if Curtis is able to share some of his time on the data side with his background and expertise, I think that gets us into a good spot. But this is obviously not a small thing. It's a significant amount of money, and it's obviously a priority for many people in the community. And if we wanted to continue to be a priority, it can be on our priority list. But if this board doesn't feel like it's a priority, I think it's actually really important to let the council know that too. Because why waste the time of everybody if it's not a priority? And if the board wants to say that it's not a priority, we should do that.
I mean, it's not, you can't just think DEI is not a priority. That's like a really
So
hard,
there you go.
that's a hard
I
thing
think
to
that's,
say.
I think that's your answer, Wendy.
Yes, it is my answer.
Unless that's the board you want to preside over.
I don't know.
That's why I'm saying, that's why it's such a hard area, but I still
I don't
want
have
to
the
know.
answers, but it gets on there because then that's how we discuss
Yeah, I
it.
want it out there, but I also want to know what we're,
I think
What
the
we're
ranking's gonna sort of
Yeah.
help flush
Right.
this out, which
Right.
I believe you said was anonymous anyways.
It
So
is, but
let's not
just a thought on this. So because of some emails that came in, and I was thinking of doing this anyway, we're going to, for lack of a better word, elevate DEI so that it has direct connection with my office as opposed to being run out of essentially social services, right? So in that regard, the signal, I think, the intention behind that direction, And just want myself a note to be sure to send that email, which I didn't do yesterday. But the intention behind that is to pay for me to learn what deficiencies, and that's a hard word, but how can we, if we want to, reconstitute it so that it's focused on the questions that they are themselves asking you for guidance on. So elevating it so that it's directly working with my office is, I think, helpful. The second thing is that I think I agree, it clearly needs to be on the short-term objectives, but how you frame it is important. And I think what I'm hearing is there might be consensus around reconstitute or renew or whatever, coupled with my elevation of it to the liaisonship with my office is, hand in hand with that is better direction from this board in terms of what exactly its mission is, right? And what is its scope. I like the idea if you're going to give it funding and you're going to ask it to do certain things, that it help you focus on your goals and objectives. I think that's brilliant. So it seems to me like there's an opportunity to reconstitute, might not be the right word because it implies you're changing personnel, but reimagine might be too small a word too. But there's a sense, at least, and I keep saying I haven't been here long enough to really get it, but I think that there's a sense that it's floundering a little. It's not achieving, or it doesn't feel, members don't feel like they're. You guys tell me if I'm wrong, but we're not. But I think it's an opportunity for us to elevate it to the town manager office. I think the subcommittee on housing is no more.
Well, not yet.
I think that's a given what we're doing.
We have to do it isn't it on an agenda?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The members get reappointed.
Got it.
Oh, but they have a queued up item. Yes.
I was going to put the sunsetting to the resolution creating the new one, but it could be done separately if that's your board's preference. But however you want to, I thought one document would resolve this. Wasn't there another subcommittee that they requested to do?
Outreach, and they were changing the number of members.
Yeah,
Decreasing.
they want it's currently 18, they want to decrease to 15. Our data from just attendance shows that there's really 12 that attend no time, because probably that attended 10% over the last year. So you could decrease to 12, would be just as effective.
Okay, and just, they did have 2 liaisons. I assigned one with the caveat, I told them if the data study was going to happen, that Curtis would be the data, because his experience would be the data person. So it sounds like they've already made that assumption that's happening.
So if we do what they've asked, which is a reduction in numbers and eliminate the outreach, and we do what this board is contemplating, which is replace with a new housing, and at the same time elevate DEI out of social services and put it into TM's office. All of those things could be rolled into one resolution, one plain action that this board does. Put it on there as your short-term objective, and you'll accomplish it in 90 days. And we'll see what happens, and we'll review whether those tweaks and my direct involvement has any impact at all. I don't know. And I'm eager to hear from others who know more about what its current mission is. It took over from Spirit, which I'm not that familiar with yet. So.
It was a DOJ-related
Yes.
title in response to that exact issue that Curtis mentioned, history of and all that, and it's grown out of that also.
Correct. And then it started as a council and then became DEI committee officially because Spirit, it was just too complicated to keep. It was an acronym for something else that all encompassing.
So one action that resets the landscape, gives some clarity, and I think that's what I'm hearing is that, Wendy, does that make sense? Am I really getting this right?
Well,
Or is there more?
no, all I'm hearing is that where they're going to take the actions on the committee itself, the changing the number, removing 2 subcommittees. Not sure, like what you're saying, we would reconstitute reconstitute
But
them.
didn't you create it? It was created by the selectmen, so
I
they
wasn't on the
can't.
board when it was created, I think it was before my term.
Right, but regardless.
But what do we what
If
do we
the board
create?
created it, the board's gotta amend it. It can't itself change its number of members, can it?
No, we would do that, and I think this is supposed to be on the.
Oh, that's what but I thought you were saying like a resolution to reconstitute it, we're just changing, isn't there something written where the number is this and the number will
Yeah,
be
we have
this?
the rules of procedure document for the committee outlines like the number of people.
Okay, so we'd be altering that, is what you're saying? I don't know the paperwork for DEI, like, right? So whatever we have to accomplish that they need done, we will do,
Right.
right? And we're saying it is a goal, it's on the goals, and that it sounds like, I told Mary Margaret I would follow up after goal setting, because we were gonna meet after that email. It sounds like you guys, was there a data committee meeting or something, and something?
No, they just convened us, before goal setting.
Okay.
Yeah, they want to be sure that we get the information.
Okay, got it. So I just,
So what I would offer
Yeah.
is that for the goals, what we're talking about with regard to DEI, is to provide support from the town manager's office for DEI council efforts and integrate maybe that's the wrong word, but incorporate the DEI's efforts into all the goals for the board of selectmen through 2025, something like that.
Great.
That's what I was hearing from this discussion, where we're seeing the gaps, is it feels like they're over there, which is also the opposite of what we should do if they're indeed, functioning town.
and just, again, integrating into all the work that, that how it ties into our other goals is within a cost structure. Like, it's not gonna increase costs in each,
I certainly hope not.
Okay, that's all I'm asking.
You're not going to get that from this guy.
Other than the 22,000
Right, they have can be used to.
I think that they have
align to
a
goals.
grant to do this work, and they want to be able to do it effectively.
Is that- is
I
that
think they have a
grant-
concern about the Juneteenth event or whatever, just because there's increasing costs there, and there's, maybe something about that. I don't think there's increasing cost for this data project, from what I understand. I could be wrong.
Right, so we gave them the $22,000, Board of Selectmen, right?
So they just have the money, it's
So
already.
it's
out.
sitting there, right, to use. I think they're not sure that's enough, they may need more, but if the $22,000 is enough, it's already funded and it's sitting there, right? The money they're asking for Juneteenth and something else is gonna be requested, the budget, that's for grant.
Yeah.
So what we're saying, again, this $22,000 study, data study, will be used to find some components of DEI needed for the goals that we have on our agenda and figure that out. That kind of what you're
So you
saying.
could, just a little clarification. So when you see that it will be used for our goals, I think there's already a plan for that $22,000, right?
Well, that's the question. That's the question. They
Yes,
push
that's
it
what
back
I'm
to us.
saying.
I don't know. I think they want to meet to figure out what we want them to do with the $22,000.
I don't know them, but I would imagine that, because they would, tell me if I'm wrong, they would welcome, I would imagine, guidance in the form of, hey, we just did goal setting, these are our new goals, we see a role for DEI that permeates through and could be integrated into this. Can you dedicate those resources that have been allocated to you for the data study and find ways to be useful and helpful? And I think they would welcome that. I mean, I don't know the
Yeah,
individual.
so I think there's some confusion on this data study, because
Yes, that's correct.
the $22,000, I think is for a data study, that's not any part of anything that we're.
What
No,
are they-
it's not.
What are they
It's not.
studying?
It's that, well, that's the question.
Oh.
That's what I'm trying to, is that they have the data subcommittee, they have $22,000. They're gonna do a study of some data to determine how DEI impacts in the community, how we treat certain people, who feels excluded. They got this group, at the first meeting I went to with Lee, that came back, the inexpensive, not good consultants, sorry TV, that came up with a survey that I would never send out to constituents. They were gonna send it out to 100 people and offer them gift cards to fill it out. And that was what they came to us with. And then we had a lot of pushback on questions. Then Rick Rush responded, and I sent that to everybody, and they would go back and reread it, saying, well, we need to know what your goals are for DEI and what each department, and they started talking about departments in town hall, what they need and how do we approach it. So this is still that same $22,000 that they have, that I don't think they know what they're going to do with what data they're going to get, what they're gonna look at with the money. That's, if I said that 5 times, I apologize.
I think maybe I'm also confused, because I thought they hired a company for $22,000
They
for
did.
a survey. The company was backburnered us, and so basically they didn't start it. And so whatever they've done wasn't up to par, right? So they want to be able, can we continue the study, because we kind of put it on hold. So I think that's one portion, but there's also the portion for the whole town, everything else, where we integrated with every individual piece. That's maybe the results of the study. So you would still go through with the study, the $22,000 study, and then those results we use it for all.
But I guess getting back to, what are you studying? Like, what are we studying? I mean, what is the criteria of the data that we're using? Like, we could get into an IT data thing here, but
Well, I think
what are
you
you
could do
getting?
I think you did a land study, you could say road study. What is the input of that? I mean, they're all, you have a study, you have a list of questions you send out, you get responses.
To who, to how many people? I guess that's the kind of stuff, you know, pardon me?
That's one concern I've had with a number of studies
Yeah,
that we've had in the past, is that it's difficult to, if you have 100 residents fill out a study and then we're expected to use data from 100 residents when we have 25,000 to implement the decisions that we make. And I'm saying that that's across any, it's not a DEI specific, it's just, we've had a lot of studies and you have even 1,000, that's just, I don't think it's our job
Curtis, if I
to
can,
make
so
decisions based on a small number.
they put it on the, right, they put it on the back burner, there were obviously other things going on at that time. And so the question is, are they asking if the funding is still available?
No,
No.
they had it right
Still
there. So they sent, they have the money, they talked about it, then they,
The current consultant's Health Equity Solutions and Data Heaven?
yeah, so the goals are, they got the money, the overall goals of the project was to produce a comprehensive baseline assessment of DEI in Simsbury, establish short and long-term targets, recommend actions for improvement, develop a repeatable process for tracking progress. Their consultants are working with a smaller subset of these goals because they got the cheap
Yes.
one, and then discuss how can we make the most of this initial investment towards our broader DEI data project goals. And they go on to collaborative process to achieve these
Yeah.
goals. We need to talk with department heads, elected officials when we're working. You know, this is what we'd like to work with this group met. So there's a lot, then project management support they want for this, to discuss this, then follow up with the consultant. So it's this whole process, which is what I guess I'm going is, you know, are we taking up this process and what does it mean? Like, and then
I do, just to speak my 2 cents, I do have a concern of what's the ceiling.
Yeah.
Because I know at one point somewhere in this menu, $125,000 is mentioned. And, you know, is that the end game? You know, we might reach that. Do we have any sort of, I don't want to utilize the term cap because you shouldn't cap DEI, obviously, but there should be an expected expenditure, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And what I got out of that was that is still open-ended, like how much, and I think that's sort of what Mark has alluded to at one point, something you were saying. We need to tell them what our end game is, what's the package. And I still think we're like a basket that's got a top off, that's not giving them a mission, if you will, that at some point you go, mission accomplished. Obviously DEI is never something that's completely accomplished. But I do feel that we are still, even amongst ourselves, wiggling all over the place with this basket. And, you know, I think mission statement was one of the words I believe Mark utilized. I think the mission statement needs to be defined, reasonable, and attainable. And that's what we need, is that reasonable and attainable goal for the result of our DEI endeavor. I mean, obviously it can go on forever, but the 125,000, you know, scared me when I
That
read the
didn't
first
say,
time.
they said.
So
So,
I would invite everyone
wasn't
to
there,
look
there you
at the
go.
DEI Council's vision and mission statement. And I think it would be really important now that Mark is here and is willing to take on the stewardship as the staff liaison to help to coordinate this, because I think that that has been one of the disconnects as to why we're at where we're at. And I think that would be helpful. So I'm willing to work with the DEI Council as its liaison, letting them do their work as volunteers, and ensuring that they're getting the right staff support from the town.
can I add one more thing?
It's your meeting.
Well, don't keep saying it's my meeting,
It
it's
is.
our meeting, it's our meeting. So I guess the question that I have, the takeaway for me is the data study, the $22,000 data study. Do we want that to really be a thing? Or do we not do the data study, they have $22,000, and we say, look at economic development, take economic development as your first topic. What we pick a DEI need in economic development for our community and focus on that and bring that back to the board. Like, people say they don't have any, you know, there's no Spanish food section at
Well, I think that's where
Fitzgerald's,
they should
right?
do the data study to determine what the
How
need
do
is.
you, what do you study? I guess, whatever, I'm gonna stop. I don't know what you're studying
So
to
if
find
I,
that answer.
I think what I can wrap this up. So
Thank you.
I'll take it on board. I'll get that email out to staff. Some of you know, I'll focus on that tomorrow. But that gives me an opportunity to meet with them
That's right.
and
Okay.
listen and learn and have a back and forth. And it may very well be, to Lenny's point, that the data study as envisioned today never happens. But that $22,000 funding stream is still dedicated to a more narrowed approach that in some way targets and supports DEI interplay with pick one or two of these, because otherwise the 22,000 isn't enough money. And to Steve's point, it would be 125 3 years from now. And so I think if I take it on board, I can set guardrails. I can speak kind of for the board in terms of what your expectations are, without necessarily having to take legislative action to amend the whole thing. And let's just see where it goes.
Okay. That sounded exactly on the nose.
Okay. So the objective is to work with and bolster, you know, and we'll find some language for you to review under that, but we'll keep it on your short-term objectives. Does that sound right? Do you have it?
Great.
Okay. All right, we have just 10 minutes. I want to give all of you space to wrap up and give staff and I some pointers. Again, our plan is to synthesize what we've heard tonight, come back with a document that is concise, has many of the things that we've seen as we transition from your left board to your middle board to the, I would say, the 8 or 9 vital things that we spent a significant amount of time on. We'll circulate that probably in about a week, get your comments and feedback, and then we'll find a path forward for your help in prioritizing. What I would ask that we spend just a few minutes on is the hard part, which is prioritization. You know, if each of you can give us some guidance as to what your individual priorities are, right? You may be a intergenerational series. Curtis may be 10 more fields, athletic fields somewhere. You know, I may be over here in economic development. But so I think we're going to end up with a document that really satisfies everybody. I think we do agree on a lot of things, which is really encouraging. I've worked with a lot of boards and commissions that are 5-4, 6-3. There's really no consensus on anything. Poughkeepsie's comp plan took 3 years. Their local waterfront revitalization program, which was a policy document from 2 boards, the Common Council and the Waterfront Advisory Commission, took 6 years to craft that document. And you know, it's just, so I'm really pleased, and I want to thank you all for the time and thought that you've put into this. As I said at the beginning, terms are short, 2 years pass very quickly, but we do also have to line up some of the longer term objectives. You know, and again, from where I sit, space at town hall, public safety, our senior center situation, the PAC has got to be resolved. The SBAA thing, we know we're putting a Band-Aid on that. And as we talked about earlier, the discussion has got to continue. I did circulate their answers. As I said, I haven't looked at them, but whatever happens, if the board, if both boards agree to fund it, we need a contract with them that has more teeth than the current one. And, you know, if any of you individually don't think that, please reach out to me and give me some guidance or help in how you want us to try to frame it. Because it's my budget, proposed budget to you, which will most likely propose it with these caveats. That's kind of where we're going at the moment. So with that, I want to stop talking. Thank you all very much. Give anybody who has some closing comments or anything that we left off the table that you want us to think about over the next week. Diana?
I'm just gonna throw.
One more.
You're all gonna get
As
me.
long as it's not a new school.
No, charter revision.
Oh, yeah, okay. So as I mentioned briefly, my own thought is that if we can avoid using the word revision
Yeah, charter.
and
Review.
Charter review.
adjustment, tweak, whatever, I wouldn't want to put it, well, let me hear from you. I wouldn't want to put it out there in my first year as town manager with all of the other things that I've got going on. And obviously, you know, I don't want to, personally, I wouldn't want to signal to the community that we don't like the town manager form of government. So with that, let me hear from all of you on charter. There are a lot of things that need to be tweaked. The question is, when do you see the charter review commission, and when do you start that process and bring people in to start doing the volunteer work? I will tell you, my own recommendation is that we engage our town attorney
Oh, of course.
to initially, before you do anything,
Yeah.
to get it out of the gate, to go through it and give us the 10 things that need to be fixed, in addition to.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
just don't have time to look up. When this first came up, because it came up at the last board, wasn't there like a plan with Bob or a list of things that came out of Maria's office that you guys did?
Yeah, there's been staff suggested.
Well, but I didn't mean suggestions. I think there was like a documented, I think we had a meeting
Lead has
where
a whole
we,
bunch.
pardon? No,
Sorry, lead has a whole bunch.
no, I know. I'm not talking about content. I'm talking about the process
The process.
of the charter
Yeah,
revision. And what
so-
steps we would be going through, and there is something documented on that, Mark, that you
I haven't
could
seen
have
it.
from the
In
past.
fall 22, I think it was on winter 23, was on a board meeting to kind of start the process of considering it, and kind of what that would entail and the schedule that you need. I believe last budget cycle, you asked for some CNR funds for town attorney for the process.
Yeah, we did.
Outside of
We
the
did.
tenure and expensive process. Could be. You could always consider it and not doing it.
But I would like to find that, I think there is a.
Yeah, I
document.
have, one board of selectmen to find based on the Clearfield demonstration. And when I find that, one, I'll also find the charter revision discussion you guys had on
Yeah.
the timeline, and also multiple.
And see if there's a document that went along with that,
There is.
that Wendy's referring to, because I haven't seen that.
I'll grab everything and send it to you guys in the email.
Yeah, so, as far as content goes, right, so, you know, Lee's ideas, I'm gonna say this for the record out there, Lee's ideas were just Lee's ideas. Of a change in form of government, a change in what boards and commissions could go away. So those are not board of selectmen, that we may consider them, but some of them are larger changes than tweaks. And so I'm just putting this out on the record that those are not anything that we've agreed upon on our own in case that document ends up going out, because it has been FOIA. So I just wanted to.
Yeah, we've never even discussed that.
Pardon me?
I said we've never even discussed
Yeah,
that.
so I just wanted to put that out there, that don't put it out there that this is what we're doing, because it's just the interim town manager's thoughts. not
Will we
mine.
get a chance to talk about those recommendations?
We will when we get to Board of Selectmen charter ideas, which I don't think, I think right now,
In February or?
Pardon me?
Are you gonna put that in February?
So, no, my thinking is, this, my original thinking was we need to get through the budget before we look at the charter. That would be my thinking. And again, the budget is gonna be all of March, right? With the beginning of April is the budget decisions. First of all, we would need to regroup as a board or have discussions on the tweaks that we'd like to see, as Steve pointed out. You know, what do we think are things that, as a board, we would want to see in this charter revision with Bob at the table, right? And then narrow that down to items and then figure out how you pick a charter commission. I've never been on one or done one. And then they could still go out beyond the scope of what of the charter revision and, you know, so I like the idea of, to be honest, I like the idea of, you know, building our relationship with Mark as a board and the town manager before, and going out and seeing the strength that we have here before we go out and start soliciting changes to the structure of our government or to tweaks. So that was my initial thinking, and when I said that to you, then you said, it's going to take a long time. You said, if you start then, it's going to still take time to build what we want to do, to define the committee. So you were saying that's still like a year out, maybe, or you're starting next year to actually work on it. I think it's kind
If
of
we started now, anything would be next one. And then I believe charter changes have to be by referendum.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're definitely not gonna have it on this fall.
No.
So it's already bumped to next year. That being said, there's no reason to wait until the last minute, like my son does with his homework. Sorry, couldn't help it. I think a methodical plan where we can go through, the charter's huge. I mean, it's not that huge, but it's pretty big. And I think there's a lot of nuances that many different vantage points will help us with. And I think the slow boat is the proper boat. And I think we need to initiate it pretty soon to have it complete within 12 months and then in the next election.
So 18 months is what I was told is the timeline. I think that was in that letter
I
potentially.
think
It
that's-
depends on what they're gonna do with the charter commission. There's other things though, and Lee's not recommendations, less than it, beyond just charter.
Well, we were going to talk his ideas. Yeah, we haven't gotten, we didn't get to that. Because it's on the, isn't it a slide? Yeah, it's up there now. So,
Please, yeah.
so that was part of.
But back to charter review, so am I hearing you want to put it on the short-term objective so we can get rolling on it this year in anticipation
I think
of
we-
being an 18-month year? Because
We have to initiate.
I only ask that because, you know, for your first document, or for your first rollout of goals and objectives is changing, because it'll be perceived as changing, even though we know here that it's tweaking. Do you?
I think that this is a goal setting for 2025.
Yeah.
For this board.
Yeah.
And it's not agenda setting for this meeting or our next conversation. So if it is something that needs to be done, we should put it on our goals. Otherwise, we won't get it done.
Yeah, I agree, something in the next 2 years definitely needs to be addressed and open. I mean, I think for us to say tweak, you form a committee, it opens up, the can's open. It's
Yeah.
whether they decide to make tweaks or big changes, that happens through the process. So, you know, we can't open it saying we're opening for charter tweaks. It's just, it's open. But I think there's never a right time, you know, so it has to be done at some point here, and we can always say, you know, this isn't a good time because we're working on this or we're working on that. So if we put it on for the next.
You already have
it's
it.
open at some
We
point.
got it.
Charter review.
Excellent. Lastly, Lee's suggestions that you've all already seen, so I don't have to spend a lot of time on it. We talked about police. Streamlining the number of, and consolidating the number of boards and commissions is really a subject for the Charter Review Commission, right? Work to define the roles and responsibilities of the Economic Development Commission, which we've talked about. Any other thoughts on any of these, or any of the items that weren't included in our, we did edit Lee's list to include just the ones that made the most sense in the short term, but And if you want to take some time to go through them and shoot me an email on anything that you'd like to see continued focus on in the short term, well, we're happy to do that.
Vicki, were there any discussions on the increased general fund contributions to CIP and CA and our field fund work? Is that ever come up in a discussion
I would like
as
discussion.
numbers and?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious
But
about it.
we potentially underfunded and it's getting down the road.
Correct.
It's artificially kept our tax rate low, which I appreciate, but right now, we're paid.
We're going to take it right.
And
So
numbers.
Heather, it is a discussion that we've been having internally,
Okay.
since I got there. It's a big topic, so, obviously it impacts everything.
There's one thing on here that I had talked to Tom Roy about last year. I don't know if it's, may not be on there, so can I mention it?
Yeah.
It's just about, it falls into the whole sustainability and the EV charging network, because we have the 2 stations at Town Hall. I know there's money that through Eversource and I believe through the infrastructure bill to get more EV charging stations, and Tom Roy had started looking at that because there was a talk about potentially at some of our other facilities, and do we charge for the electricity, and I think he had done
No
some.
pun intended, right?
Yeah, very good. And he had looked into it, but I see it on these. I don't know if there's any further discussion if that's something, under the sustainability.
I looked into that, and I was thinking, because I just reached out to, to Tesla to be like, what would it take to get a supercharger in Simsbury? And they weren't against it. I didn't know exactly where to put it, so they want you to have an exact location for it. But they're willing to work with you. I mean, there's a cost to it, but,
So I have some thoughts on that, and I don't know that we're gonna hammer it all out now. I don't think you need like a DC fast charge or a supercharger, in the town here, even just having the level 2, charging there, it's like 30 amps or whatever that you're gonna get through. The one at Town Hall, Big Y has one, 2 stations there, and they have the charge point on there, and they don't charge you to charge there, but there's lots of charge points that do, and I travel a lot, and even just getting a couple of minutes when you're going into a grocery store or somewhere else, and if the town were to put them in, and I don't know what the economics are, but I would be in favor if we were going to invest in that, that we did have some cost recovery and paying the charge. I did that, we were down in Stanford for some hockey games, and the parking garage had a charger there, I plugged in, I paid a couple bucks, I got the charger that I needed to come home, no problem. So I think that there's ways that we can do some stuff like that that don't have to be at the entire cost of the town, but even if we did pay for the electricity there, the incremental cost is very small. It's like paying for somebody's water at the water fountain in reality. So it's a pretty minimal thing. So I don't know where this fits with Mark Scully and the sustainability.
well, one thing,
This
what you're
organization.
saying, I think there's an economic benefit though, because if you think about where there's a supercharger,
Sure.
people go into it to charge, and then they have to spend half an hour somewhere. Usually you put it in place where you do businesses.
But I don't. So I spend like 10 minutes there.
But it's you personally though.
No,
So there's no superchargers around it, right? So you get Avon, you get a bunch of people. I have a Tesla.
I tried to get him to put him at Antonio's, I was willing to. We didn't have the traffic counts for Tesla.
Right. Look, I was kind of kidding about the Parks and Recs, but kind of not kidding about Simsbury Pharmacies.
On a
People
road
do it all the
trip, I can't get the kids and the family out of the rest stop fast enough for the fast charger. You just get a level 2 charger there, especially at a restaurant. Actually, it would be a good spot, same thing with the grocery store. If I leave my house, I go to plug in a Big Y, and I go home, they paid for my travel, all the way there, and the amount of time it's been charging me. So that's my observation.
I'm curious, is there a cap on time though? Because that's the thing I worry about, is that people stay there for the full charge and leave their car.
Oh, I think we should have a long discussion on it. I've seen places where they charge you after an hour, there's an idle fee there. Once you're done charging, they charge you for parking there. If you leave it plugged in, you're not charging more. There's all sorts of things. And ChargePoint and all the other vendors, I'm sure, have.
Because I can see that being an economic development as well.
So,
the ones at Town Hall were funded through a grant originally.
yeah,
Part of the grant was you couldn't charge for a certain amount of years for the
Electricity.
After that, we passed that, where we could charge, and I believe I've heard that like the amount to add, like credit card readers and charger, basically be more than it's worth, than we're.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there are grants that easily.
Yeah, that was the other times that does, thanks for reminding me.
So am I hearing that we want to put that on as a short-term objective to get more charging stations or not throughout town?
Oh, anyway.
I think it's a subcategory of.
Yeah, I mean, that's gonna be an easy, low-hanging fruit,
Yeah,
kind
'cause we
of,
could do that.
easily look at it and get the grant to do
I
it.
was gonna say, just put it under the grants.
Right.
Because it's a grant.
Put it
It's a
under
grant
You
thing,
can
as
look
long as you get a grant
you
for
get
it.
for free.
I don't think there'd be any trouble getting a grant for that.
Yeah. And then it's
I
like,
know.
you know, and then we just make sure within the town we find a space, whether it's a commercial space or, you know, somewhere that's high traffic enough, and it's a win-win kind of for us.
Love it. Anything else, Wendy?
Yeah, well, a couple
When-
things that, you know, I don't wanna, I'd like to, this is maybe not a goal setting, but I think it would be good for the board to, look at the opioid money that we're getting, to see if there's something policy-wise we wanna do with that funding. It's not really a goal, but it is, I have it under public health and safety, to be honest, as a category.
And the NIPS money.
And the NIPS money, because it's money that is coming to our town for municipal use that I believe could or should be policy driven, especially the opioid money, because there's a lot of special uses for it. I know at one point I was told Kristen was looking into ways that she would recommend using it and to bring it to the board of selectmen, and I don't know where that stands, and that's just something that I just had on my list, so since we're all sitting here.
Well, with the, oh, sorry. I was gonna say just to, also to look and see if there's regional opportunities to use opioid money with that.
I think they are, and that might be one of her answers.
And then look into the health district, is polling kind of police chiefs and social services director from the region. to kind of figure something out.
But one thing that was brought to my attention through like a couple of organizations was that the money can be used to contribute to the homelessness crisis that is in, I guess, the closest city is Hartford, because it's not just Hartford residents, it's people from our community or people from other communities that have fallen into addiction and they ended up homeless. Whether that's something we would want to use the money for or recommend it to use for. You know, it's just another board discussion decision. If we know where else we could use the money, if that might be something, again, not necessarily goal setting, but it would require, there would be a consensus.
Yeah, personally, it's a budget kind of conversation.
I had one comment, just I'll share from a constituent about the NIPS money.
Yeah.
We pulled all public trash, honestly, we don't have any public trash cans anymore. And they were saying part of the problem with the NIPS being on the roads and everywhere else is people that do want to throw them out. The nature of the NIPS is you want to get your nip and move along, you don't want to bring your empty bottle home. So they were saying perhaps we could utilize some of that money for some public receptacles that people would, in theory, throw some of these nips in, and it would help us keep our town clean at no cost.
Yeah.
So it's a policy, we have the carry and carry out policy by one of the boards in the past. And I believe that is what covers the trash cans and parks and all that. So-
Right, no, and I was
it's in that
for
policy,
that.
so what for you guys to choose to do and,
And this is the garbage.
I didn't know we ever had them. All right, so I guess it's 8:01.
Yeah, I have one more thing.
Your turn.
Is there a way to, and this may be just an information request, but I would think it's kind of cool, is to see when we have these studies, how effective are we actually doing these studies, or is it just sitting there? And can we go back a few years and say, like, do like an analysis and say, how much money would it cost? Do we actually use it?
Oh, Tom loves you right now.
You know, like,
Curtis, can we do that moving forward rather than looking back at the
no, I guess
previous
look
thing?
back, you look back.
And we don't.
Because that
parks container.
But that money's already gone.
But you need to know how effective.
But we already know the answer to that question.
I don't know.
Well, I know.
Look at the lawyer, how effective
It's
are
not good.
What's the number? What's the quantitative number?
I challenge you to find any efficiencies in half the studies that have been funded by municipalities all over this country.
Sure, but I don't think
You
that's.
know, consultants make a fortune, you know, rolling into municipalities. And I'll give you a study, I'll do a data study, this and that. And these binders, you know, just like this one, end up on town managers and city administrators' desks collecting dust. So, but looking forward, it might be good to put it into our performance metrics and you know, this whole concept with use of technology to measure performance outcomes that, you know, if you're going to fund a study, you're going to follow it through a few years to determine how many things were implemented, whether it saved the same, and whether it was there any use to getting the study at all in the first place. But I wouldn't want to look back 4 years. I'd be afraid of what I would find. And then I've got to justify, or we would want to justify the use of funds for things that, so. But moving forward, it's a good.
I like it.
I know you do. Diane, any last thoughts? Besides the $20 million senior?
Exactly, well, you know. No, I think we've hit it on a lot of things. I think I've shared a lot. And,
Yeah.
no, I think we have some really important things that are on our goals and objectives.
Yeah.
I think we're tackling some really big things, which is what I was hoping that we would do. And, you know, now it's just a matter of let's get them implemented, let's move the work forward. And I think we are the group that can do it.
Good. Well, you certainly didn't shy away from any of the difficult issues. I think everything on the board is urgent and important, and you know, we've got a little work to do to get things prioritized. But any last words, Steve?
No. Well, back in 1948, no, I'm just kidding. I'm all good. I thought we got a lot of stuff done.
I wasn't
excited
clear on
going
that
forward.
time. Do you support moving 315 or?
I think that it has been part of the plan and it makes sense at a future date. Prior to that, I see the downside for the town as the biggest thing. But I understand the premise, but it's not a complete vision yet. So I think we can kick that can for 15 years.
Okay.
So, you know, 15 years is beyond our scope.
Gentlemen, good work over there at staff level.
Yes, thank
Tom,
you.
really
Yeah,
thank you. Franklin, good job.
John,
We
Phil,
appreciate it. A lot of good work went into all of this, and thank you. Our final slide.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody wants in there?
Come on, that's the wrong board of selectmen.
Yeah, that's 10 years old.
Fact.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What was in the middle there?
Nice job, you did this. Which one are you?
It's not even 10 years old. That's Amber and Eric and John and.
Yeah, you're there, Heather.
It's
So that's very great question.
We need more questions.
Okay, I'm looking, I need a motion to adjourn.
I'm going to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?